The young man comes to, revealing himself tied up in an unknown place that looks like a desert. The system voice reports that the ambient temperature is rising with each passing minute. The heat caused severe burns on the guy's back, but he does not react to the physical discomfort. Instead, he tries to assess the situation, looking around the area and noticing a creature called the Fallen. The system provides reference data on each object that the young man's gaze lingers on. The young man's wrists are secured with shackles designed to monitor slaves. However, he refrains from trying to remove them, focusing on finding protection from the sun. The guy moves slowly forward, trying to find a source of water or shade. His movements are observed by a group of people, representatives of the local nobility. They express dissatisfaction with the guy's calmness, expecting a spectacular fight for life. At present, the young man keeps an internal count of time while simultaneously analyzing the situation. After almost an hour, he discovers a small amount of water, which miraculously maintains an icy temperature. The guy realizes that there is an underground sewer system underground where he can escape the heat. Nearby, he finds a hatch where the system provides new information about the rescue. She notes that the only chance to survive is to reach the tower by any means necessary. Before continuing on, the young man gestures disdain towards the onlookers. The nobility reacts indignantly, demanding that the Fallen be sent to him so that they can kill the boy. One of the high-ranking representatives is informed that the young man is a talentless resident of the lower levels. After the conversation ends, the man orders his subordinate to go to the danger zone and eliminate the target. The knight must restrain displays of aggression and negative emotions in order not to attract monsters. He is tasked with destroying the young man under any circumstances, even at the cost of his own life. In his previous life, when the young man was beaten by a group of hooligans, he showed no reaction. Even his father's death did not bring tears to his eyes, which led to the condemnation of those around him. Emotionless Brian worked in a special police unit, quickly solving complex cases. While pursuing the criminal, he fired, and the bullet hit the young man right in the heart. He died in his home world, but soon came to his senses in a completely new reality. Having descended into the sewers, the guy examines himself, noticing changes in his appearance. Brian asks the system about its goals, but it evades the answer. Ahead, the young man sees a knight, probably a representative of the elite with a high level of strength. He shows no concern, hiding in the narrow and tangled passages of the sewers. Without leaving his hiding place, the guy starts a conversation, deliberately provoking the enemy. He uses his knowledge of the system and his own analysis to mislead and confuse the knight. The guy claims that he is not an ordinary slave, and that their entire meeting is part of a greater plan. He notes that the fight is needed to entertain the spectators, and the man is just bait. Finally, the youth emerges from the shadows, and the decayed one, attracted by the knight's confusion and doubts, attacks him. He doesn't have time to react, as a result of which the creature tears its prey apart, dragging it under the water. The system warns that even the slightest negative emotion can trigger an attack. However, Brian ignores the reservation and without hesitation walks into the bloody liquid, searching the body. He finds a travel device that allows him to instantly change location. Having removed the chains, the young man activates the mechanism and teleports towards the tower. At the Foreign Intelligence Office, an officer reports on the information obtained during Brian's interrogation. The captain of the 7th Division, Chin, is dissatisfied because only the name and age were collected. His colleague, Captain Lum of the 13th Division, mocks the investigator's lack of efficiency. The subordinate explains that it is useless to scare the guy or try to lure him with promises. Moreover, he himself pointed out the weaknesses of interrogation methods, eventually adopting the process. During the conversation, the young man became interested in the structure of the tower and the nature of fallen creatures. He also asked to provide a table for classifying talents and abilities. Lum shows interest, expressing a desire to add Brian to his own squad. He also draws attention to the fact that Chin, apparently, has a personal interest in the future fate of the young man. Then the man says that some time ago he was involved in a case of disappearances of residents from poor neighborhoods. Even though it was outside his department's purview, he took on the investigation anyway. Eventually, the trail led him to an underground gambling establishment connected to local nobility. Xian found out that members of the aristocracy began sending people to blue zones of increased danger. Participants found themselves in critical conditions, and the chance of surviving was virtually zero. Despite this, one young man spent 2 hours there without attracting the attention of the monsters and neutralizing the assassins sent to him. The captain later received a call from a strange woman who wanted to save Brian without the dealer's help. The husband suggests that Lum conduct the interrogation himself, to which he readily agrees. Sen notes that the boy is potentially an effective weapon that should be studied and used. 700 years ago, the end of the world occurred, after which dangerous creatures began to appear. The Fallen. Humanity was faced with the threat of destruction, but suddenly, a mysterious tower appeared. It was in this building that people managed to organize conditions for life and survival. Along with it, an accompanying power developed that allowed one to resist monsters. It increases the basic characteristics of a person and develops when staying in dangerous areas. The external environment also influences things, improving them and turning them into spirits. There are also talents, powerful individual abilities, the total number of which is 124 units. They are ranked by levels. The higher the number on the list, the rarer the ability is. Usually people have talents ranging between the 1000th and 700th levels inclusive. A person whose talent value is above 500 is usually recruited into military units. Brian receives all this information along with an explanation of the tower's social structure. He is told that Chin spent a whole day in the most dangerous blue zone, reaching the 8th level of strength. For this result, even influential persons from the aristocracy of the restraining corps recognized him. Lum enters the interrogation room, releasing all of his subordinates. He is going to talk to Brian personally, when he is alone with him. However, before the man can even say anything, the young man declares his agreement to join the army unit. The guy explains to the astonished captain how he came to the conclusion about the intention to recruit. He also determines from the outer scar on his arm that Lum uses a shield in combat. The man realizes that he is dealing with a unique analyst and a genuine tactical genius. He comes to the conclusion that Brian should be brought into his own unit as soon as possible. The young man notes that he was only given a talent table up to level 700 and demands access to the full version. Lum immediately goes to get the necessary materials, hoping to please the guy. Returning promptly, he asks why Brian knows so little about the tower. He responds with a general excuse about memory loss, without providing a convincing explanation. The captain says that at the moment, the strongest talent, 256th, belongs to Chin. More than 20 years ago, there lived a man with the number 76, who subsequently disappeared without a trace. It is believed that he was taken away by an organization from the upper floors, but no investigation was conducted. In the list, Brian gains his own ability, which allows him to receive data through his gaze. She has number 24, and the young man is not going to reveal that he has it. The new body raises a question, as it has high skills, but a low level of accompanying strength. The guy asks if someone can be forced to reveal their talent, receiving a negative answer. All abilities are individual and remain hidden even among core members. Lum explains that a person can only activate one talent, but additional ones are unlocked by killing fallen ones. Brian's ability is not combat-oriented, so he is considering how to go beyond the tower to get another one. At this moment, the captain begins to actively recruit the young man into his squad. The guy refuses, arguing that the 7th squad often goes outside the tower. Lum does not give up, continuing to persuade and offer different options. Then Brian notices that his interlocutor is still not married, despite his still advanced age. He advises choosing those who like a man from the very beginning, without wasting time on persuasion. The young man explains that he has already made a final decision and does not intend to reconsider it. Finally, he adds that the number 13, under which Luma's squad is listed, is unlucky. After some time, Chin and Brian descend to the lower levels of the tower. The husband reports that although the guy's ID was not found earlier, he is now an official resident. Brian will also be provided with housing, but he is required to pay for the rent himself. The young man suddenly asks for permission to leave the tower the very next day, causing surprise. He is reminded that his level of accompanying power is insufficient for safe exit. In response, he offers to go under surveillance, promising not to create any difficulties. In the end, Chin agrees, accepting the boy into his own group that will go to the White Zone. Finally, they arrive at the bottom floor, which will now be Brian's residence. The captain goes on business, leaving the boy and his subordinates in the port without further instructions. The young man is informed that his things have already been delivered to his new apartment. In addition, the officers provided him with some clothing for his basic needs. Sen gave Brian a small stipend, so he has some money on hand. The accompanying officers tell you more about the area and warn you against the scams of local traders. Meanwhile, on the advertising poster in front of them, an announcement about the spirit begins to be broadcast. In the video, the actor tries to sell the shovel, describing its unique properties. At the same time, he introduces himself as an officer of the Intelligence Corps in order to inspire confidence, although this is a complete lie. One of Sen's subordinates, Yun Shu, gets angry that someone is pretending to be one of them and runs away to the captain. Brian asks the second escort to go after her. He agrees and gives her a bag with money and things. The guy arrives at his new apartment, where a package from Senya with special contents is waiting for him. Inside, there is a clock that tracks negative emotions and signals when they go off the charts. The young man puts them on, but they are useless to him because they constantly show the value 0. The box also contains an emotion-suppressing agent that lasts for 5 minutes. After the drug's effect, a person becomes hyperactive, so it is used only when necessary. Brian, without hesitation, immediately injects it into himself, and after the effect is complete, he feels nothing as he expected. The next day, a reconnaissance team goes to the steles that can transport people through space to different places. The system reports that they are holding back the unknown at the top of the tower and advise against interfering there. Sen arrives with a group of people, introducing them to the newcomer who is to work with them in the future. Wang is the son of a wealthy family on the 3rd floor, strong but reckless and obsessed with danger. Lin comes from the 2nd floor and gives Brian a cold reception, causing him to make fun of his appearance. The young man irritates Lin by insulting him for his feminine traits, which causes noticeable anger and tension between them. Shan looks harmless, but in reality, he is the fiercest and strongest of the group in combat. The last one is Yin, also from the 2nd floor. She is vengeful and hides an important secret from people at the highest level. Brian notes that there should be 6 people in the group, but 1 member is currently missing. Chen explains that he is dead and advises the boy to think more about himself than about others around him. A man emerges from the portal, responsible for preliminary reconnaissance and assessment of the area for work. The world outside the tower is random, so someone needs to determine whether it makes sense to send a large group. Chen goes ahead and calls on his people to follow, keeping up and following instructions. Yun explains the portal's workings to Brian in detail so that he can better understand its mechanics and functions. Every time someone enters, a number is created, and the number grows horizontally in the counting system. Over the 700 years of the tower's existence, humanity has already explored millions of different areas beyond its boundaries. The group is transported to the confines of a mental hospital. The system reports a hotbed of evil within. There is also a secret that only Brian can uncover, which the system warns him about in advance. Sen records a temperature of 46 degrees, calls it normal, which surprises the guy. There is only road and trees around, no grass or minerals. The atmosphere seems unfriendly. Van is eager to get into the hospital, ignoring the caution Brian reminds him to exercise. The young man calls for slowness, which causes mockery from Lin, who openly despises him. They are interrupted by Chin, who opens the gate and enters first, without waiting for the rest of the team to react. There are 4 buildings on the site, each 19 stories high, but you can only enter one of them. The guy says that you need to go to the very top to go to the other building via the air corridor. Sean reports 17 evil spirits inside, jokingly pretending to be frightened by the situation. Inside, Brian notices 2-year-old blood on the wall with unknown symbols drawn on it. Van notes that there are too many rooms here, and exploring each one would take too long. Chin asks Brian's opinion, and he advises moving straight to the fourth building of the hospital. Lin reacts with irritation, sharply asking why he decided this way, demonstrating aggression. The guy explains that the strange layout resembles a prison where there is only one possible exit. The fourth building is located further away from it, and therefore is the most secret of all. Suddenly, Shan notices the elevator, which has started to descend towards them from the upper floors on its own. Brian asks why some facilities are operating after the building has been unoccupied for a long time. Sen answers that sometimes things start working on their own for no apparent reason. The elevator reaches the first floor, and the group prepares to meet whoever is inside. The door opens, and a fallen appears, instantly charging towards the group. The captain takes it upon himself, and in one movement cuts off the head with his spirit weapon. According to the system, the sword became a spirit on the 5th day of its stay outside the tower. Everyone moves forward, but Brian stays behind to examine the body of the slain monster. He finds in his clothes a note from a patient who hastily hid the piece of paper before his death. The date indicates a year before the apocalypse, but despite being 700 years old, the paper is in good condition. The young man enters the elevator and suggests that everyone go to the 11th floor to see the stronger fallen. There may also be useful information they can gain by exploring the area. Upon arriving, the group hears a voice laughing and crying at the same time, as if the two had merged into one. Suddenly, an unknown liquid drips from the ceiling onto Yin, and then a hand appears, trying to attack her. Sen protects the girl when the monster starts to attack. But this time, one blow won't be enough to finish everything. Everyone joins the fight, their emotions rising but remaining low, which attracts the creature. Brian watches from the side, bored. His watch the only one that still reads 0. The fight continues, with no end in sight to the enemy probes, and Lin notices that no one is attacking Brian. The young man says the voice they hear affects others' emotions, causing them to lose control. He goes ahead to scout while everyone is fighting, despite Chin's urging to wait until the battle is over. The guy goes, saying that they can join when they calm down and the monster stops attacking. Wang is surprised by his courage, but Chin points out that it is not just courage, but something else. After all, if it were only courage, the clock would have exceeded 0. But this did not happen. Meanwhile, the young man explores the floor, finding an empty dog cage where the fallen man was kept. The monster couldn't escape on its own, so someone released it, as evidenced by the traces in the room. Scattered around are syringes containing restraining agents and other drugs that were used for restraint. The system directs him to a table where there are 3 objects, but he can only take one of them. After choosing, the others will disappear, and he will receive a talent, the creature's friendship or its hatred, depending on the item. The guy doubts what to choose, and at this time the group deals with the threat and goes to look for him. He analyzes the information, realizing that it was a laboratory where subjects communicated secretly. The note indicates that more special people were transferred to the second building. Those with abilities were kept there, and it was there that the stronger beings would meet. Lin, trying to get into Brian's locked room, again becomes a victim of a monster attack. The captain protects him, and the battle with the creature resumes. The young man is surprised by the comb because no one has used it in such conditions. Moreover, the system does not provide any information about it, as if it never existed. At this time, the rest of the group's emotions are running high. The fallen one becomes more aggressive, influencing them more strongly. Shan gets excited, ignoring requests to locate the creature in the building. Price manages to clear the space, and that's when Brian comes out to them, selecting a comb from among the items. He urges everyone to move to the top floor, and Lin bombards him with unanswered questions. When Shan notices that the monster has disappeared, Brian reports that he has temporarily suppressed the source of the threat. Later, while riding in an elevator, the teenager asks the captain if humans can become fallen. He points to the watch, which has a green dial as long as the emotion value is below 75. When it exceeds this level, the color changes to orange, and at 175, to red. Sen cuts off the explanation, But Brian already understands that then the person finally becomes a monster. Upon exiting on the 19th floor, the group finds themselves in complete darkness with no light source. Sean says that there are 6 creatures beyond the door ahead that are higher level than the one he killed previously. The captain moves forward, ordering the others to wait, and quickly dispatches the opponents in combat. Wong explains that as the level of the accompanying power increases, additional unique abilities appear. The system compares it to a game where Chin improved his speed and others chose different directions of development. The man next to Brian was developing his attack and health. Lin chose attack and speed, 50-50. For Shan, it is the path of perception and attack. But Yin's abilities are unknown, but she is the weakest on the team. The captain dealt with the goalkeepers of the second building, and they all head further down the corridor. Brian asks why they don't stay in the safe zone and level up beforehand. Lin responds that the problem is the obstacles, which get worse every 4 hours of stay. Then the speed decreases, the senses become dull, the mood changes, and hallucinations occur. The system reports that Chin himself once survived 24 days outside the tower in battle. This means that he received over 100 debuffs and still continued to fight the fallen. The guy hears advice to go down and find the key that has swallowed an unknown creature. If he uses a comb in battle, he will be able to get more rewards. From above, the group is watched by a monster that has intelligence and carefully watches every movement. Sen receives the Gorgon Medusa's lantern to illuminate the dark corridor in front of him and the group. Yin suggests going straight to the 3rd and then the 4th buildings of the hospital. Brian objects, explaining that he first needs to find the key to proceed further. The captain supports him, reminding him of the rule that the location cannot be destroyed in any way. If there is a lock and key in an area, it is impossible to enter it by force or cunning without using the key. The elevator turns out to be false and does not work, which immediately complicates their further plans of movement. The system indicates that the sign hanging above him does not have the number 19, but rather the number 0. Floors down are designated negatively, down to -18. This is a kind of analogy to the 18 circles of hell, which does not bode well for the group. After going down one flight, they realize that they need to go further along the corridor to a new staircase. This will happen at every level, and the path will gradually become more difficult due to the repetitive structure. As they continue moving, they see more and more fallen bodies covering the floor and walls. Shan reports that they are approaching a living creature that is very close. Suddenly, Brian freezes, receiving an unexpected message from the system. He had bought a camera back in the tower, and now, apparently, it could come in handy in this situation. Lin laughs, noting that the chance of an item turning into spirit is extremely low. The guy ignores his words and takes pictures as directed by the system, following the instructions. It works, and he gets a snapshot from the past of a guy with monster traits. Brian asks the captain if high-level declines retain human consciousness and traits. He confirms that sometimes they retain traits, such as speech, but there are also evolutionists. The teenager assumes that the photo depicts the guard of the building, which is such a creature. At that moment, a giant creature with the body of a spider appears above them, the guy from the photo. Sen rushes to attack, but the enemy dodges and laughs, playing with the opponent. The floor begins to cave in and Brian falls down, losing his footing. The captain jumps after him, manages to grab him, and together they disappear into the dark abyss. The boy wakes up to the lamentation of the system, wounded but alive after falling into the abyss. Sen had already conducted reconnaissance, saying that they were on the lowest floor, where the deceased were fighting. On the floor, there is a number 12 without a scratch, as if it was deliberately avoided. Brian learns from the system that the guy in the photo likes that number because he is the 12th student. Suddenly, the doors from the upper floor fall down on them, raising a cloud of dust and debris around them. Thanks to the photograph, the teenager receives the thoughts of the fallen creature depicted in it. He learns that the monster is capable of controlling 23 more creatures and swallowed the key. He is the 12th disciple, held in the 12th cell, the door of which fell down. Brian once again analyzes all the available information, trying to put together a complete picture of events. He understands that the floors are both prisons and arenas for battles between the strongest creatures. Only the strongest can rise higher, continuing their journey through these deadly levels. While contemplating, the young man hears the Fallen One's thoughts about fighting and devouring defeated opponents. The higher he rose, the more dangerous, but also more insane, he became in his actions. The monster was going to become the teacher's strongest weapon and destroy the tower to the last stone. But on the -14th floor, he was defeated by a creature from the first building. The creature was known as Poor Thing, and its comb was later taken by Brian during his search. The 12th continued to devour others to gain strength and challenge again. In the end, he lost again, was left in the second building, and his opponent was transferred further. The teenager gives Price all the information he was able to learn from the fallen man thanks to the photo. The captain doesn't like that the monster they encountered is a high-level opponent. He tries to get back to the rest of the team as quickly as possible, but two monsters emerge from the darkness. Sen orders Brian not to get too close, but also not to leave this place without him. The system informs that the creatures before them can no longer be called fallen beings. One of them attacks, using the hardening mutation to deal a powerful blow. The captain cuts off his arm, activating his ability to attack further in battle. He delivers several more blows, cutting the enemy into pieces without any obstacles. The guy listens to the system's explanation that these are the monsters that the 12th had previously absorbed. They are more like mechanical dolls with a minimal set of reflexes. A third creature appears behind Brian, approaching him almost silently. The young man tries to use the lamp to turn the enemy into stone, but it doesn't work. He dodges the blow, and at that moment, Chin manages to come to the rescue with a weapon. However, the monster has a rare mutation that allows it to experience danger forward. Avoiding the captain's attack, the creature disappears into the shadows, preparing to strike again. Brian states that he can handle him himself, leaving the price of another opponent. He can handle stealth, but not a space-distorting creature. The captain pulls the guy away from the attack from above by the collar, managing to save his life. After this, he rushes into battle, distracting the enemy so that he focuses on him. He tries to cut the monster into pieces, like everything else, but its body is liquid. Because of this, the creature avoids cutting attacks, maintaining integrity even after being hit. Meanwhile, Brian is about to be attacked from behind, and the system warns him about this. The creature completely ignores Tsenya, concentrating on the young man with the lamp in his hands. The teenager guesses that the enemy is bothered by the light emitted by his lamp. He throws it to the captain, pointing to the enemy's weak spot, the central eye. Sen strikes the lamp with his sword, causing it to shine brighter and blind the enemy. At this moment, a shadow appears, an ideal shelter for light-fearing monsters. The rest of the group continues to engage in a fierce battle with the arachnid fallen, who is using his abilities skillfully. He dodges attacks, trapping opponents, creating deadly situations. Having released a web, the creature almost catches up with Yin, but Lin pulls her aside in time. When an enemy attacks him from behind, Wang intervenes and takes the blow at the last moment. Although he manages to damage the paw, it has little effect on the opponent due to his strength. The 12th mocks their weakness by extending his arm to launch a long-range strike at the team. Thanks to coordinated actions, the group cuts off the limb, but the fallen one quickly restores it. The monster creates several apostates, planning to quickly defeat and absorb the opponents. Brian's plan works, and the shadow creature emerges from the shadow that the captain rejected. It attacks him, but Chin dodges, ending up between the two opponents. He activates an ability that increases his speed and skillfully deals with both enemies. The man points out to the young man that someone else in his place would not have been able to react in time. The guy calmly replies that he acted the same way because of the captain's presence nearby. Sen realizes that they were not fighting the fallen, but rather dolls created by the 12th. He strives to return to his subordinates as quickly as possible in order to have time to help in the battle. And they find them themselves, falling from the upper floors along with the spider's puppets. The captain immediately rushes to destroy the creature, using the help of Van and Lin. Thanks to this, he jumps up and deals with enemies in the air in one moment. When reactivating the ability, it hits 4 enemies at once. 12th appears from behind, realizing that Chin is the strongest and most desirable opponent. The monster launches a series of attacks, but the man moves faster and dodges each blow. He cuts off the fallen man's hand, but he barely reacts, grabs the captain by the leg, and throws him away. While the man is coming to his senses, the enemy has already managed to completely restore the damaged limb. Sen quickly recovers and returns to the fight, ready to continue the confrontation. The husband fights the fallen man on equal terms and perhaps even surpasses him in combat skill. The system warns Brian that in order to gain the talent, he must defeat the creature without help. The guy steps forward, declaring that he can handle it himself and does not need the captain's support. The entire group watches in amazement at the newcomer's self-confident actions during the intense battle. Sen does not want to let the teenager into battle, but he insists on his decision to participate. Brian advises others to be more mindful of their own indifference and composure in this situation. He stops in front of 12 as he threatens to eat him and end the fight. The monster grabs the guy, preparing to kill him, but he shocks him by saying that he is his teacher. The creature believes because the teenager provides convincing evidence to support his words. At first, Brian calls 12 his best creation and then laughs, saying it's a joke. He continues to bully, and the spider gradually loses his mind due to emotional pressure and resentment. The others look on in amazement, but Chin assumes that the young man learned something important in the first building. Brian puts pressure on 12, calling him a failure and a shame, recalling his defeat to Poor Thing. The teenager copies the character of his father, which exactly matches the image of the teacher for the monster. He had previously studied several notes found on other floors during their explorations, learning a few things. In the end, he takes out a comb, and 12th decides that he killed his rival for him. The monster begs for a second chance, promising to complete any task without objection. Brian comes closer, promising to give the creature eternity next to him. The creature agrees to everything and asks what exactly it should do for its new master. The teenager leans over and whispers a demand into the monster's ear, causing it to go into shock. As Brian steps away, he sees 12 laughing madly and committing suicide. He transfers a talent to the young man, which allows him to absorb part of the characteristics of a killed enemy. The comrades are stunned and ask what happened, but the guy says that they just need to trust. In the end, everyone decides to leave it, and Brian says that they need to get the key from the body of the fallen one. Wang thinks this is a job for Lin, and he is given a set of dismemberment tools. While the man works, the young man talks about the structure of the world outside the tower and its limitations. He understands that thanks to these rules, buildings and objects remain intact. Some doors cannot be broken by force and can only be opened with a key. Finally, Lin finishes the job cleanly, takes out the key, and calls for moving to the third building. As the group moves forward, Brian wonders why the monsters do not leave the building. Chen explains that no one knows the answer, but it is known that the fallen cannot leave the location. Shan reports that there are no fallen in the third building, and one can proceed calmly. The system gives Brian additional information that there is nothing there but boring records. She adds that the poor thing became interested in the guy and left him some hidden clues. The group opens the door to the floor and goes inside, beginning a new phase of exploration. The system actively refuses Brian to go further, but he ignores its warnings. Eventually, she gives in and gives some advice, directing the young man to the third floor. Everyone gets into the elevator, which is working this time, and the guy presses the button for the right floor. Sen notes that he could not determine the logical basis for his previous visit. Although he doesn't like to explain, Brian begins to tell the story of the reason for his knowledge and decisions. He points to his 0 level of emotion, explaining why the fallen's voice sounded different. According to him, the creature offered to choose 2 items out of 3, and he took the diary and the comb. Lin is indignant that the guy didn't take the key, because it could open any closed door. He denies that the key could open anything dangerous, and that the risk was too great for him. Brian says that all his knowledge comes from a diary that disappeared immediately after he read it. When Lin is surprised that he remembered everything, he reminds him that the team is an elite one. He believes that such a group must have a photographic memory, otherwise it reduces its effectiveness. Coming out into the corridor of the third building, the child adds that everyone has their own role in the team. His role is as an eye, an observer, and everyone must trust him to improve performance. Suddenly, Yin hears a voice calling her sister, after which her vision begins to blur. She is suffocating, losing the ability to move, but Chin brings her out of this state. It requires reporting any suspicious sound to avoid further danger. Brian advises not to read anything in the archives, otherwise the patient's data will influence emotions. Only he can do this without consequences due to his special ability to protect against influence. He asks everyone to stay close and remain calm while he looks through the necessary documents. After opening the first file, the guy is plunged into a memory where an unknown liquid is injected into a patient. But since he does not experience emotions, he can only observe what is happening around him. The doctor conducting the experiment wants to give the subject a heightened sense of smell. Instead, it becomes covered in scales, indicating that mutations in the body are uncontrollable. The subject begins to tear scales from his own flesh, causing more and more harm to himself. Brian tries to stop him, but his voice is not heard here, and it does not produce any result. While the teenager is lost in his memories, the rest of the team discusses him among themselves. Lin asks the captain where he found such an amazing and unusual newcomer. Qian says the boy was a slave in a survival game in dangerous conditions. The news that he survived in the extreme temperature zone astounds everyone gathered. Yin suggests that Brian may lack certain emotions or expressions of them. The captain also adds that an unknown woman with unknown motives tipped him off to the young man. At this moment, the guy comes to his senses, but hides it, listening to the conversation. Van asks what will happen if the stranger appears again and wants to take Brian. Sen categorically notes that he will not allow anyone to offend his people on the team. Pleased with what he heard, the guy attracts attention and asks how long he was unconscious. According to the captain, it took about 40 minutes before he came to his senses after this. The guy didn't recognize anything special, so he accepts the next document for review. He finds himself back in the test subject's body at a time when the monsters are becoming more numerous. The tower has not yet appeared, but 12th's teacher mentioned another similar structure. The young man wants to get out of the memory, realizing that there is nothing valuable or new in it. But suddenly, a girl appears behind him. Poor thing, full of anger and resentment. Brian pretends to be weak in order to play on the general feeling of indignation in her. He says she left him 3 items and he chose a comb that never existed. This causes a reaction, and the team notices outwardly that something strange has started to happen. The poor guy wonders why he chose this particular item from the options offered. The guy explains that the comb is not an instrument of torture and is the only one that does not have bitter memories. He suggests that it is something from childhood, when the girl was treated with love. He continues to speak, trying to elicit an emotional response from the poor thing. Brian says he doesn't hate the fallen and wants to know what caused the tower to appear. He introduces himself and learns the girl's name, Una, who has now become more mature in appearance. He notices a pattern on her neck, remembering that he saw a similar one on the 12th. The guy wonders why she didn't kill the spider and what happened to the other creatures. The girl is sure that once the guy sees her real appearance, he will get scared. The young man offers to test this, and if he is right, he can simply kill him. She takes him to the first building, where he was already. But now everything around has changed. On the table, Brian sees a medical record and immediately opens it, wanting to learn the poor thing's secrets. Finding himself in a memory, he watches as a man screams in pain due to the intervention of doctors. The husband begs the girl for help, asking her to take him out of the hospital by any means necessary. She later learned that the man had become fallen, having completely lost his identity. Meanwhile, the girl herself developed a dark spot on her hand and a crack on her forehead. In a later flashback, poor girl visits a strange boy in a dark room she had prepared. He also once asked her to take him away from this place at any cost. Lying on the examination table, the girl cries inconsolably, and doctors inject her with suppressive drugs. Her appearance is changing more and more, with more black spots and cracks appearing. Another patient, whom poor thing also carries away, experiencing incredible sadness. Panic is growing in the hospital as more and more patients begin to lose their minds. Meanwhile, the girl's hands are half blackened, and the spots continue to grow. An eye begins to appear in her forehead, completing the eerie transformation of her appearance. Brian ponders what he saw, trying to understand what really happened. It seems Una used her abilities to create a refuge for others within her own mind. But this was not enough to comfort them and keep them alive to the fullest extent. Then she began to take them away, absorbing the grievances and suffering of the subjects. The price of this was that they lost their will and desire to live independently. The poor thing herself was becoming more and more like a black monster, with eyes all over her body. Slowly, she too began to go crazy, like the other fallen, but no one could save her. Finally, turning completely, she broke free from the cage, breaking the restrictions. She sealed all the buildings, preventing anyone from leaving or getting inside. The girl perceived it as a game, chasing the hiding doctors as if playing hide-and-seek. The frightened people gave off a pleasant aroma that made one want to eat them. Una later met 12 and defeated him in combat several times. She liked him because he was determined to wait for his teacher without running away. The girl shared part of her power with him, because, apparently, it was because of her that he was abandoned. The voices of others in her head forced the poor thing to kill the doctors, although she did not want to. She only wanted to play, but everyone was afraid of the monster she had already become. After finishing reviewing her memories, Brian realizes that she is still a good child inside. The system appears for a time, giving the guy a chance to get data on the poor thing. But the girl's mental strength is too great, and she again suppresses the boy's ability. At this time, the other members of the group are hindered because they have been outside the tower for 4 hours. Yin receives a speed reduction, and her legs now feel heavy, as if they were made of lead. Van's arms lose strength due to the attack drop, and he can barely hold the weapon in his hands. Lin is even more unlucky. He gets negative thinking, which rarely appears so early. Something similar happens to Shan, who completely loses his sight and cannot see his surroundings. In Tinya, the debuff becomes a flash of anger, but this has almost no effect on his combat capabilities. He sends 2 fighters with strong obstacles back to the tower so that they don't interfere with the others. Lin cries from the feeling of injustice, and the captain kicks him out of the team as soon as possible. It is unknown what kind of restriction Brian received, as its effect has not yet manifested. Suddenly, strange things begin to happen, and the others close a circle around the young man, preparing for battle. Shadow creatures appear, similar to the fallen the group fought earlier. Sen quickly dispatches the enemies when Van assumes they were caused by his angry outburst. He orders the newcomer to be guarded while he deals with the rest of the enemies around him. Brian finds himself in the middle of many doors, not understanding where exactly he needs to go. The system appears again for a moment, explaining that this is the main access hall to the memories from the documents. She also reports that the boy has received a confusion debuff that shifts his orientation by 65 degrees. The young man does not see a problem in this. He only needs to find a relationship with the previous direction. There are more than 100 exits around it, but one of them leads back to reality. The system disappears again, and Brian heads towards Una, noting that he is different from other people. Handing the girl a comb, he convinces her that he is not afraid and does not hate her or the other fallen. He tries to prove that people are afraid only because of ignorance and misunderstanding of their nature. Eventually, he manages to calm the poor thing down by telling her that she is more human than monster. Brian promises Uni that he will find a way to get her fired so that she can get outside the hospital and explore the world. Voices shout at her that he is lying, but the girl resists, wanting to believe the guy. Then he talks about his goal: to better understand the world and understand the appearance of the tower and the fallen. He shows his first memories since finding himself in a new reality after waking up. Finally, he calls himself Una's friend, who came from outside the mental hospital. She rejoices at this and finally accepts his promise as true and real. The girl advises not to go to the 4th building until the guy becomes stronger. She wants to meet him in reality when he is ready for such an event. She also tells you to look into the 1st building, where an unknown person left a certain object. Brian suggests that it could have been 12th's teacher, acting in secret. The poor guy adds that the thing he brought looks like a teleportation disc. The guy comes to his senses, finding himself in reality, where the room is already completely empty. All the documents and the Fallen disappeared, leaving no trace of their presence here. The young man says that it is better to end the mission and not go further, because even the captain may not cope. Wang begins to praise Sen, calling out his strength and fighting ability. Brian explains that the hospital was a breeding ground for monsters, and that there's something worse in Building 4. He promises to go into more detail about the events in the document as they move forward. The teenager notices the absence of Lin and Shan, and learns of their debuffs and return to the tower. The young man recalls that he himself experienced confusion, but had already managed to fully adapt to it. Van asks the captain if they will go to the last building, and he confirms this. On the way, Brian explains in more detail what he saw when he looked at these documents. The hospital examined the Fallen and also tried to create them artificially. They eventually succeeded with the 12th, and the almost successful example was Una. Sen asks why she is only a semi-successful result if she is stronger than the arachnid. The young man tells of her origin, and that she is an accident that absorbed someone else's pain. The captain warns him not to get attached, because the Fallen are still fallen. The guy agrees, but suddenly, a double of the poor thing appears in front of him, which only he can see. She looks a little angry about the conversation she overheard, but still leads them further to the right place. At the indicated point, the group actually finds a disc that looks like a teleportation device. The system explains that it is a means of transportation that returns to any location visited. There are only 7 of them left in the world, and the method of making such devices is lost forever. There is also a note with an offer to play the game and explore all the zones prepared by the author. Brian is happy, because in the end, he will get answers to all the questions that have been bothering him for a long time. He says that he will keep the item as a souvenir, receiving the captain's consent to this decision. Having finished, the reconnaissance squad teleports back to the tower, completing his task. Una watches this from afar, and the guy smiles and promises that they will meet again. The girl happily waves her hand at him, and the system sums up the results with not very good results. The poor thing creates a refuge in her mind, filled with hopes and expectations of a meeting. Shang and Lin return from the blue stele, rather than the white one they came out of earlier. They understand that, starting from the second building of the hospital, they have entered a different research area. They are warned that they can only return after 12 hours due to the strain on their bodies. Finally, the rest of the teams return, and Brian immediately begins to irritate Lin with his actions. Sen reflects on the exceptional nature of the boy, as this is his first time going on a mission outside the tower. He had already been outside the tower for more than 4 hours, which is rare even for experienced people. The captain reports that the young man will have no tasks to complete next week. This exit was an entrance exam, which the teenager successfully passed, and formalities needed to be arranged. Brian decides that he can take up some work during this time to earn more money. Late in the evening, Chin reviews the files of his fighters, assessing their condition. The newcomer's mental state is too calm, which is not at all like ordinary people. If he can maintain this level of focus all the time, he'll be a level 8 pro in a year. The captain burns the original ability analysis to hide Brian's potential. He fills out a new dossier, significantly understating the guy's real performance and achievements. The man then calls the service bureau, entrusting them with the task of protecting the young man. In exchange for this service, he promises to bring something from outside the tower after each exit. At this time, Brian arrives at the store of a girl named Chen, where he bought a camera the day before. He watches the drama between her and the 2 guys who just found out about her double affair. Crying and repeating that she loves everyone, she hits the young man straight in the heart with her words. The girl convinces them that they are her 2 wings, and she does not want to part with either one. As a result, both leave the store as friends, happy and quite satisfied with the situation. Brian walks inside, greeting the owner of the place and getting his attention. He wonders if she was having trouble, but Chen says fans just wanted more. She admits that she doesn't like this type of guy anymore and would like to get rid of both of them at once. Getting down to business, Brian shows off the camera that eventually became a spirit. The previous evening, when he was alone, the boy also visited Chen's shop. The system immediately provided information that the owner is a Casanova by nature. The young man doesn't care. He looks around, searching for the things he needs among the assortment. His attention is drawn to a rice cooker and a mug, which he decides to purchase for himself. The girl advises not to take the first item because it will be completely useless to use. She guesses that he is going to go outside the tower, but he ignores her questions. He insists on the purchase and begins to bargain, trying to reduce the purchase price. In the end, he gets what he needs for free, but he must take the camera into the zone and return it. Even if he doesn't become a spirit, it won't be a big deal for either side. The guy agrees to the deal, exchanges names with the owner, and leaves the store. Brian is currently talking about the new effects of a camera that has recently become a spirit. With its help, you can get a snapshot of yourself at a specified place at a selected time. Before the girl can snatch the item, the guy says he wants to discuss payment first. Chen begins to flirt with him, offering to become hers. But the young man moves away, explaining that he did not come for this. The owner calms down and asks to check the goods first, before making final agreements. She takes a picture of a recent scene with two boys arguing over her. The girl is immediately inspired, already planning how she will get rich on such a unique spirit. Brian cuts off her joy by explaining that she can only take 2 pictures a week due to her low levels. The teenager states that he agrees to the barter, but strictly warns not to lower the price or haggle. He says he can choose an equivalent item, information, service, or all of them together. The girl wonders what exactly the young man would like to receive in exchange for the camera. He asks about the live broadcasts in the center of the port, wondering about the veracity of the broadcasts from outside the tower. He wants to know if real broadcasts exist, because it can't be that everything is a lie. Information about real broadcasts becomes part of the fee for using the camera. Chen agrees and takes the guy to the back room of the store for a longer conversation. Most of the people living on the lower floors go outside the tower under the protection of the intelligence corps. They obtain red and blue grass, because the squads always clear the territory of the fallen beforehand. That's why none of them have seen monsters, even if everyone is afraid of them and avoids them. Despite the fear of the creatures, people strive to see them with their own eyes, at least once. This is why many people are interested in what is happening in areas outside of the usual safe places. Although the tower is huge, it seems like a tiny structure compared to the previous world. However, you can't turn to the intelligence corps because the government won't allow the army to work for the merchants. Another problem is that electronics do not work outside the tower, except for spirit devices. There are few recording objects suitable for containing and preserving an image. One of these were the chains that Brian wore when he first came to this world. A lot of money was spent on their creation, and now there are only 13 of them left. This number of identical effects is due to spirit diffusion, a rare phenomenon of granting abilities to a set of items. The young man wonders why the chains don't use the intelligence corps for their operations. Chen explains that the owner is not an ordinary person and has a high influence, so it is impossible to take away the spirits. Brian asks to get him streaming equipment and a voice-changing mask. In exchange, he offers to continue taking things out of the tower so that they will evolve over time. Having come to an agreement, Chen is already dreaming about how he will bathe in future riches. They discuss the details of how exactly the broadcasts will take place and their preparation. Later in his apartment, Brian examines the travel disc that was found earlier. Yunshu comes to him, informing him that the captain is looking for him on an important matter. The guy was temporarily sent to help the interrogation team so that he would have something to do. The girl shares that the amount of work is quite large, and now the young man is responsible for her. Chen predicted that the teenager might try to leave the tower on his own and decided to create a distraction. However, the guy is confident that he will cope with this task quickly and without unnecessary difficulties. They arrive on the 2nd floor at branch headquarters number 7 to begin work. There, Brian is introduced to the head of the interrogation team, a serious man named Tian. There are no computers on this level of the tower. They are only accessible from the 3rd floor and above. The young man is given unsolved cases that have been stopped at the evidence collection stage for a year. Sen wants the mess on the lower floors to be sorted out and to show support for the people. Brian demands that all suspects be brought in for questioning to resolve the cases immediately. There are more than 100 of them, but he is confident that he can handle even such a scale of work. A whole crowd gathers in the corridor when they finally decide to carry out his order. Lum appears, asking Tien what is happening in the interrogation department that day. He explains the situation and the plan to reveal all the affairs of the shocking interlocutor at once. In the end, Lum goes to rest after the mission, without interfering with the work process. The head of the interrogation team enters the observation room to look at Brian. He is working on a case involving the murder of a husband, and the suspect is the wife of the deceased. The woman, although from the lower levels, dresses like an aristocrat from high society. The system reports that she is not a murderer, but an accomplice in a crime against her husband. She probably worked together with her lover, a casino owner, to get rid of the man. Brian asks Yunshu to bring the second suspect and interrogate them separately. He leaves notes with instructions on how to conduct the interrogation correctly and effectively. The young man then moves on to the next task without losing the pace of his work. 5 minutes later, he solves it too, pointing to the murder weapon and where it is kept. An hour later, Tien asks for help from other groups because he no longer has enough people to work with. During this time, Brian manages to solve 10 cases, shocking everyone with his speed. The chairman asks that requests for additional hands be passed on to other leaders. He takes documents from other unsolved crimes to give to the young man as well. Returning to the observation room, he orders all interrogation recordings to be erased. The man doesn't want anyone else to find out about Brian's effectiveness and poach him. After receiving a request to coordinate the groups, Lum realizes that the 7th squad has received reinforcements. He is angry that the guy was sent to the wrong person, blaming the failure on his department number. As a result, in just one day, the teenager completed all the work and also helped other groups with their chores. Tien assumes that their corps will now receive significant support from the upper levels. Brian hears about this and wants to discuss the issues in more detail and find out more details. Previously, captains would falsify reports, but since Chin took office, this no longer happens. Therefore, they had to survive only through expeditions outside the tower into dangerous zones. This time, Brian's intervention was incredibly helpful and made the team's job easier. The guy asks to say that it was a lucky coincidence and not his personal ability. He promises to supplement the documents so that it will look like the cases were closed a long time ago. Tien notes that it is illogical to reveal all this in one day because it will arouse suspicion. The young man then calls this a reason for the interrogation team to attract the attention of the higher levels. Brian believes that without the interest of the wealthier floors below, anarchy will continue to reign. Crimes occur not only because of the moral decline of the criminal, but also because of the social environment. To improve the second, political support from a more influential and powerful party is needed. Tien agrees with this logic and orders preparation for a large amount of work. He wonders if Brian really remembers all the oral interrogations that took place today. The young man talks about his instant memory and adds that all investigators should have this ability. A few days later, Chin calls the guy for a talk, reminding him that he is forbidden from leaving the tower on his own. He also hints that one should not leave traces behind, and one should take care of one's own safety. Then the captain still praises the teenager for a job well done and his diligence in the task. He gives him a reward, namely a pass that allows him to take equipment from the supply group to go outside. Brian wonders if there are any other errands he could run in the near future. The husband says that a dignitary will arrive soon and will ask about the events in the hospital. The young man asks to keep the fact of the disc's discovery at the end of their mission a secret. Sen agrees, ordering that he be notified if the boy finds anything truly special. After reading the mission report to verify the information, the teenager is about to go about his business. The captain sends him to choose something for self-defense in case of a dangerous situation. Brian is escorted to the weapons depot by Jean, a supply group fighter working with the 7th Division. Inside is stored everything that their squad brings back from expeditions beyond the walls and dangerous zones. With the help of the system, the guy views the properties and effects of items in the existing arsenal. Eventually, he notices a mask that is indestructible, but its defenses weaken as its health drops. He had come across mention of her in the hospital, but had not paid attention to this interesting item at the time. It belonged to a hunter who caught the fallen before the tower existed. The young man decides to take only the mask, without choosing anything else from the other things offered. Later, he comes to Chung, showing her the find, which immediately arouses her interest. The girl enthusiastically asks to borrow the item, but the teenager categorically refuses. Brian is interested in the status of the equipment and the completion of the necessary formalities. She shows the shackles, which, unlike the ones she wore, only transmit a signal to the screens. Chen adds that there have been only 6 real checks recently, and 5 of them ended tragically. The presenters were then eaten by the decaying ones, which, although frightening, caused a surge of interest among the viewers. Now sponsors are extremely interested in Brian's debut on broadcasts from dangerous territories. Enthusiastically, Chen receives several spirit outfits that look extremely unsightly. She then takes the young man to the mercenary base to obtain his admission and permission to leave the tower. On site, it turns out that one person is not registering. A group of 6 fighters is needed. However, there is a loophole. You can forge 5 IDs for an additional fee to officials. The girl immediately hands over the money, and now Brian has to come up with 5 new names. They all have a humorous hidden meaning that first amuses Chen, then irritates him. The person who draws them up is in shock and decides that silence is golden in this situation. After completing the registration, Brian takes the girl to his home to talk about the camera. He wonders what's special about the device she gave him before they began their collaboration. Chen reluctantly admits that 2 of her close friends went missing 2 years ago. At this time, cases of disappearances of beautiful women who were caught by aristocrats became more frequent. They were forced to participate in deadly games. But first, even worse things were done to them. Previously, 3 girls owned a clothing store for residents of the lower floors of the tower. The 2 then set out to investigate the disappearance of the others, seeking to find out the reasons. They took a photo of something important, but destroyed the film and disappeared. Chen suggests that the friends may have fallen while outside the tower. Brian promises that if he meets them, he will pass on the word that she misses them. After this, he kicks the girl out to change clothes and prepare for restraint. Behind the walls of the tower, a group of people are hiding in a hollow tree, holding back their emotions and breathing. They just lost 2 members of their squad during a dangerous sortie. The captain orders his subordinate to shut up and calm down, otherwise he will throw him out of hiding. The fallen broke their travel discs, leaving them unable to return. 4 hours ago, they arrived in the jungle, where old Shi found only 1 monster. The detachment expected an easy expedition, but circumstances changed dramatically later. The creature turned out to be stronger, quickly dealing with one of the squad members. When the second one tried to teleport the change, the monster grabbed him and destroyed the device. It swallowed the man himself, leaving no chance for others to escape. Now the captain assumes that the fallen one initially pretended to be weaker than he actually was. The creature is likely highly intelligent and knows what the travel disc is used for. 4 hours pass, and the group begins to encounter obstacles that make the situation even worse. The rain subsides and they decide to try to hide, risking everything for the chance to survive. At this point, Brian appears, offering to exchange information with the group and explore the area. At the port, Chen turns on the screen, and the people around him rejoice, realizing that this is the cold-bloodedness from outside the tower. The system informs the teenager that he is in the jungle belonging to the teacher's 7th disciple. Old Man Shi asks if the boy is a devil or a fallen one, suspecting his involvement. Brian notes that neither option is good, and that the man is too determined to die. Captain Yang points his gun at him, aiming to kill him and take the travel disc for himself. He is hampered by the confusion debuff, and Brian points out that he has already underestimated the enemy and is making the same mistake again. The man retreats and asks for forgiveness, believing the teenager to be too strong to fight. Brian gives a fictitious name, Constantine, and advises against risky plans. The 3rd member of the squad is Keelan, a descendant of the dragon race and the most sensible of all present. He has talent number 777, the disc of joy and sorrow. The captain offers Brian to give them the transport device, promising to send help. The system explains that for the solution and rewards to be given, all three must remain on the ground. There are 8 possible endings, and it all depends on which of the participants survives in the end. Brian refuses, because the monster did not kill people, but only broke their movement discs. He concludes that the fallen enjoys the fear and despair of his victims. If one prey escapes, he will grab others to continue his cruel game. The creature cannot detect it, and therefore will not perceive it as a potential threat. He says that we need to find out the secret of the area and kill the creature as quickly as possible. There are 2.5 minutes left before the next rain starts. We need to find shelter. The teenager explains that the fallen left them because hunting is more fun when there is hope of salvation. The captain recalls how a subordinate decided that the rain was normal and moved forward, and was mistaken. It turned out to be an acid that quickly corroded the man's skin and killed him on the spot. The explosion of emotions in the group attracted the attention of the monster, who began his pursuit. Brian finds a hole in the ground containing the dried-out skeleton of an unknown creature. The system reports that Dandler's creature is already looking for new prey for its deadly game. Brian leaves Old Man C on guard and calls the other two to come down with him. The captain orders Killen to go first, since his talent rarely sharply increases his temper. They descend into cave tunnels where strange mushrooms with a dull red glow grow. Suddenly the Killen stumbles upon a skeleton and is frightened by the unexpectedness, unable to contain his emotions. The system says that this is one of the victims of the fallen, a woman who died more than 200 years ago. She left a message stating that the monster's regeneration was endless, but the rain was harmful to it. However, this could have been an erroneous assumption of the first explorers of these dangerous places. Brian wonders what the companions noticed during the fight with the monster in the previous encounter. The captain confirms that the creature is recovering quickly, but the rainwater leaves wounds on it. The teenager imagines the area as a chessboard, where black cells are dangerous and white ones provide a hiding place. He needs to figure out how to keep Dandler under the acid rain long enough to win. The system highlights a key object near the skeleton so that it pays attention to it. It turns out to be a wedding ring that the fallen one accidentally left here a few days ago, thanks to his disposition. It has the ability to temporarily make those around it fall in love with the one who wears it, even if he is dead. Suddenly, Old Sai gives a signal and everyone runs quickly to the exit of the cave. It starts raining again outside, and the system says it's stomach acid. A creature appears, watching the group from behind the trees and not daring to approach. According to Brian, the monster is weak, but has telekinesis and absolute regeneration. All fallen eat humans, and for some unknown reason, Dandler does it in a special way. While it's raining, neither he nor the people can get closer. They can only keep an eye on it. The captain believes that Brian is strong enough to save them and destroy the creature. But the guy is not going to fight, but is planning a game of hide-and-seek with the monster. He chooses to distract Ian by reminding him that the travel disc is in his hands. Brian teaches the captain how to overcome the state of confusion, and he eventually agrees. The rain subsides and Ian engages in battle with Dandler while the others escape. Brian assures that he will save everyone, because his receipt of the reward depends on it. It seems to him that he is playing a chess game with a mysterious teacher, and this excites him. At the port, people are unhappy with the broadcast because there is no fallen man in the frame, and there is no sound. Everyone is demanding that the channel be changed, and Chen is disheartened when the channel manager recalls the low ratings. Suddenly, a guy named Wei bursts into the TV studio, promising to improve the sound for a chance to work. He swears that he will correct the situation and make her more restrained, so the girl agrees on the condition. She wants Brian to be featured on the broadcast, and when the sound comes on, viewers become more interested. Wei does the voiceover work on the show alone, making up the plot as he goes along and adding lots of funny mixed sounds. Chen is inspired by the fact that the stream now has every chance of becoming a real success. Meanwhile, Brian and his two companions descend into the caves underground again. They find a diary, but it cannot be read until the next level is unlocked. The teenager urges them to move on to find the next shelter before the rain starts again. On the way, he thinks the place looks like a giant stomach, but Dandler's role remains unclear. The captain continues to fight the fallen, becoming more and more accustomed to the state of confusion. As soon as acid starts falling from the sky, he hides, leaving the monster in the rain. He screams in pain, and the group realizes that Ian is doing a good job. Yet something about this bothers Brian, and he is eager to uncover the mystery as quickly as possible. Price gets a call from the woman he assigned to keep an eye on Brian, and she negotiates Wei's exile. She asks how the captain compensates her for her losses, and why he cares so much about a man he barely knows. The man does not respond to this in any way and simply hangs up, not wanting to continue the conversation. In the forest, the group finds a treehouse and climbs up to investigate, leaving C on guard again. Inside, they see 3 objects, and the system tells them that only one will lead to salvation. On the table lies a syringe with an emotion-suppressing agent, an umbrella, and a working teleportation disc. Brian wonders if someone planned for the mercenaries to get here, or if it was just a coincidence. He wonders if the outcome is chosen passively, at the risk of losing someone by accident, or actively, independently deciding who will live and who will die. Brian tells Keelan that if he could only save one, he would choose him. He then asks which item among the 3 young people he considers most important in their situation. He assumes that the serum will remove debuffs, an umbrella will help against the rain, but one disc is useless. Brian confirms the conclusion and decides that he should now find Dandler's diary. He believes that the disc will not save everyone, so the most useful thing would be an umbrella if the rain is really harming the fallen one. The boy notices a room that remains clean, even though the monster is always on schedule. He understands that the creature is avoiding obvious refuge and gives it pleasure from the victim's desperation. In fact, the fallen one does not suffer from acid, and everything that happens is just his game. Wei continues to voice restraint, making up descriptions of what happens to the characters as he goes along. Chen asks the person in charge of the TV broadcast how the statistics have changed since the sound update. The answer shows that the interest of viewers has increased and will soon reach the top of popularity. In the new plot, the group searches for treasure and finally finds it in a treehouse. Meanwhile, Brian learns that C lied about his debuff and assumes the influence of the fallen's will. He decides to use the serum to prevent possible betrayal and gives the other items to Keelan. The only question that remains is what could actually kill Dandler in their current situation. The young man goes downstairs, intending to immediately inject the drug into the man, who begins to go crazy. Old man Shi is slowly losing his mind, and paranoid thoughts almost push him to make a big mistake. At this point, Brian catches up with him, injecting the serum into his neck, and the man instantly calms down. He discusses how useful such a drug would be during forays outside the tower. Keelan explains that the new companion immediately understood the effect of the serum as soon as he saw it. This shocks old man Sai, and he begins to hope for salvation thanks to Brian. Meanwhile, the guy is trying to put together the full picture. A notebook is mentioned with mysterious symbols similar to what he saw in the hospital, but he cannot read it until he receives the final key to unravel the whole mystery. The teenager examined 3 corners of the area, where important points were located at the same distance. There is one more clue left to find, but to do this, you need to choose a direction of movement. On the southern side, according to the system, there is a crypt with the body of a mercenary. But there is false information stored there, left intentionally, so there is no point in following in that direction. The system reports that Dandler is entering Phase 2, enraged by the reduction in fear in his victims. Finally, Brian determines the correct direction, where the cave with all the answers is located. On the other side of the forest, Ian holds the fallen one in the rain, but he regenerates again and again. Suddenly, the monster changes and begins to speak, calling itself a pawn of its master. He says that the space around him is a chessboard, and warns that he will not be the killer. The man runs away under the creature's final warning, not wanting to risk his life. Brian and his companions reach a building where C detects someone's presence, causing an alarm. The guy has a bad feeling, because all the clues he has together form a chaotic picture. It's suspicious that Dandler is so weak, especially compared to the power of the 12th Fallen. The young man decides to enter the building himself, leaving Qilin and Shi outside to cover him. Inside, he finds a box in which, according to the system, someone alive is hidden. On top lies an archival document with the teacher's handwriting, which mentions events in the hospital. The teenager assumes that it is a high-level fallen from the purple or even red zone. The stranger leaves a riddle, asking what kind of person is capable of living two separate destinies at once. At this moment, the guy begins to be drawn into memories, losing control over his body. He sees a baby in a hospital, where a man in a robe asks him to sacrifice himself for others. The child is treated well, although the nurse with whom he constantly communicates seems very upset. He comes to the doctor with a request, but is refused without understanding the reason. Later, the boy lies on the operating table for several days, listening to reproaches for his slow recovery. The child regrets this in the hope of learning to recover more quickly from losses. The next time he tells the doctor he doesn't want to go through the surgery, he gets a stern reminder. The husband says that many people still need help, and the boy agrees to intervene. The child's tongue, eyes, and teeth are removed, giving the body a short time to recover. He loses his memory, and everything starts over again, while the nurse tries to remind him of the past. He tells the doctor that he doesn't remember anything, and the doctor gets angry as he leaves, but later becomes softer again. The man tells the boy that he is saving many people, and the child ends up on the table again. Once again, he loses his memory, resulting in him being placed in a tank, left to float in liquid. A nurse visits a boy, regretting his unfair fate, but he does not understand her tears. Later, she says goodbye to him by cutting his hair in preparation for surgery. This time, it is not the organs that are cut out, but the brain, and the cycle is repeated without preserving memories. He listens again to the doctor's pompous words, while the nurse sobs behind the door from helplessness. The memories shift to another boy returning to school after completing treatment. He undergoes a knowledge test, where he demonstrates a very high result. He is offered to participate in the regional Olympiad, and he agrees because his only value is to be useful. One day, he dreams that he is lying on an operating table, and next to him is someone who looks very much like him. This happens more and more often, as if forcing him to constantly and persistently search. At school, on the roof, a classmate confesses her love to him, which leads to a relationship between them. In fact, she is disgusting to him because she only wants his status, intelligence, and money. Besides, for him, a girl is perceived only as food. Several of his organs fail, which is why he has to undergo surgery again. It seems to him that after this he ceased to be himself, merging with that stranger from his dreams. A boy asks his mother if the boy he keeps seeing in his dreams exists. She advises not to think about trifles and focus on studying to earn money for the family. A classmate begins to irritate him with her behavior and hypocrisy in everyday life. She is disgusted by homeless cats, but at the same time posts photos from cat cafes. The girl boasts that she is dating a rich and smart young man, which infuriates him even more. He increasingly wonders what it is like to be a person, experiencing a strange attraction. Two boys begin to communicate in their dreams, becoming closer to each other. But one day the second one forgets everything. His memories are completely erased. At school, a girl pulls a boy into the medical room to kiss him, but he accidentally bites her. He sucks blood, and suddenly feels how bright and rich the world around him has become. The girl pushes him away, looking at him with fear, as if he were a real monster. The father compensates for the damage and blames his son for the financial loss, but this does not bother him. The guy only regrets that he ate little because something woke up inside him. For the first time, he finds meaning in life, feeling a new thirst and previously unseen strength. One day, the teacher introduces him to a psychotherapist, an interesting man named Kane. The man calls him Dandler and asks if he likes the taste of blood, piques the boy's interest. Subsequently, the schoolboy again gets closer to the guy from his dreams, realizing that he will soon forget him. On his birthday, a psychotherapist comes to his home, causing surprise. A man takes a guy to a parking lot where he gives him a woman in a crying sack trying to escape. This delights the young man, unlike the car his parents had given him earlier. Dandler communicates with Kane all year round until he tells him about his strange dreams. In response, he learns that this is reality, and somewhere there is another sufferer. The young man wants to save him, but the man stops this impulse, believing that the time has not yet come. Kane explains that the guy is still friendly to the world and is not ready to act differently. The number of the fallen begins to grow, although they do not yet pose a direct threat to humanity. The man takes Dandler hunting not only monsters, but also people. He claims that they are not on anyone's side, but belong only to themselves. The guy begins to mutate, becoming less and less human in appearance and behavior. His family and teachers begin to fear him, planning to send him to a mental hospital. He wonders if this means he's now officially a real monster. A masked man appears in the city, causing fear among the residents to begin to fade. Kane advises to avoid this man, waiting for his death in order to save the guy in the hospital. The rate of mutation is very high. People are lining up to run to the tower for safety. The masked man has either left the city or is in hiding. But that's not important anymore. The streets are becoming dangerous, and fights over food now happen almost every day. Kane says the world has 3 or 4 years left before humanity locks itself in the tower. They eventually arrive at the hospital where the other Dandler is being kept under observation. The boy runs to where there is more light, but everyone ignores him or detects him immediately. He calls for a nurse, but as Kane said, there were never any in this hospital at all. The memories are cut off, and Brian realizes that the changes in the world began not with the appearance of the fallen, but with the external environment. Even then, people started getting talents, like the boy from the hospital. Number 42, Infinite Nirvana. For 7 years, he was used as a storage facility for human organs until another child was born. All this time, he was held up by the illusory nurse, like Una's comb. His reflection was corrupted by the teacher, or Kane, who sent the boy into a fallen state. While Brian was thinking, a voice suddenly sounded, saying that he had sent Jan, Chilin, and old Shi into the forest. He probably wants to force the teenager to make a moral choice by turning him into a tool instead of Dandler. But the teacher miscalculated, because Brian was never concerned about the morality of his actions. The voice explains that there is talent and mutation, similar abilities, but the former is rarely awakened. If the bearers of certain numbers in the talent sequence come together, their abilities can be combined. This fusion is capable of surpassing even the most powerful skills, creating a truly exceptional effect. Keelan's talent can resonate with the 666th, Satan's Kiss. In this case, there is a possession of fate, which brings trouble to someone preferring the owner's skills. Yang knew about this effect, and it was the teacher who provided him with the necessary information for future actions. Kane also hinted to the captain about the artifact in the forest, adding that it would not be obtained without the mastery of destiny. Brian realizes that Dandler ate the owner of Satan's Kiss with Ian's assistance and support. This group used the fusion of talents to create landslides in ore veins for profit. The captain sent capable people there in advance to absorb the luck and complete the dangerous task. Thanks to this, he completed many missions and gained a good reputation among other mercenaries. According to the teacher's calculations, Jan's team killed at least 200 people in such operations. They were experienced miners, so they survived devastating landslides time and again. They were considered masters of their craft and were respected on the lower floors, their experience being valued. All those who died because of them became fallen, but could not enter the tower. Kane reveals to Brian the essence of the final task, where he will have to make his choice. Dandler is about to enter Phase 2, and all the gastric juice will rise from underground. There is an insoluble boat to the west, but you can only get there by jumping on branches. It will hold a maximum of 4, and the boy will have to choose between 3 and a baby in a box. Brian speculates on the nature of the teacher, suggesting that he has a talent for prolonging life. The system reminds that there is no time, because the fallen one is about to flood everything around with acid. The teenager realizes that all of Kane's trials were originally intended for Chin, and not for him. The captain is considered the strongest warrior of humanity at present, and his presence prevents the tower from being destroyed. It seems that the teacher does not plan to kill him yet, but is only trying to lure him to his side. The task of conscience that he gave is quite troublesome and contains embedded answers. Whatever the subject chooses, it will be calculated, and the result will remain under control. From a moral point of view, Ian should die, but then he will be reduced to the rank of a hero among other people. Only the justice of justice can properly punish a mercenary for the crimes he has committed. All three members of the group may have leads on the teacher because he has had contact with each of them. But if they survive, there will be no way to save the boy in the box. Brian releases the child to find out what exactly he knows and remembers about this world. The boy is confused because he has not seen anyone except the monster Dandler for the last 700 years. He is kind and naive, and with his own organs he saved the life of his double from the hospital. During this time, the Fallen One committed evil under the leadership of Cain, finally becoming a dangerous predator. Brian calls the guy Prometheus, realizing that he always wanted to start over. The teenager seems to be reenacting the scene of the teacher's meeting with Dandler, but with a display of compassion. Brian was led to the conclusion that the boy had not forgotten anything by a fictitious nurse. Since she never existed, she couldn't constantly tell the child to remember the past. What caused Prometheus the most pain was not even the surgical intervention, but the indifference of people. Despite this, he remained good, and his second personality also has its own bright beginning. Brian argues that Dandler can't stay because he'll continue to kill more people. From the outside, Yang runs up to his allies, followed by the one who fell on the eve of the second phase. The teenager's choice, knowing that it will be he who determines the development of the next events. Brian reveals that Cain deceived both boys, ruining Dandler's chance at the tower. Now he will remain forever fallen, and will never be able to become part of humanity again. The teenager invites Prometheus to come with him, stop the creature, and finally break free. If he decides, he will be able to live freely and will no longer be locked in a cramped cage. The child is afraid that the person in front of him is not real because he has been inventing friends for 700 years. Brian insists on his existence, calling for Dandler to be stopped once and for all. Prometheus explains that he already tried to convince the double, but Cain twisted their words. The teenager invites the boy to meet the fallen man in person to talk directly. They go outside, where a group of mercenaries is already waiting for them, ready to fight and escape. There, Brian sees a monster whose level has risen to 7, and the entire area has become part of the body. At the same time, the creature has a pathology, weakness, possibly caused by a wound from someone stronger. The teenager takes Prometheus on his shoulders, jumps onto a tree, and calls the others to follow him. Jumping along the branches, Chilin almost falls, but old Shi manages to grab his hand. The earth begins to leak stomach acid, rising higher and higher. Ian reasons that Brian has probably learned the secret of the treasure, so he needs to watch every step. He had previously received a mission from a rich man, but that same evening he died, and the mission was stopped. It didn't matter, because the captain already knew the access code to the desired location. He tries to interrogate the teenager, but he ignores all questions and does not give any explanations. Keelan notices the bag on the guy's shoulder, but it suddenly disappears right from his sight. The trio of mercenaries are confident that their companion has a high level of perception. In fact, the bag has become a spirit, and now things of its size do not take up any space. Brian is disappointed because he is waiting for his rice cooker to finally evolve. This happened because of Keelan's ability, because even the mention of the bag changed reality. Prometheus establishes a connection with Dandler, causing the liquid around him to start bubbling. Jan almost gets splashed with acid, but manages to jump to the side and avoid being burned. Brian notices that it's going to rain soon and calls everyone to gather on one branch under an umbrella. They cannot move forward, but to remain in place would be to doom themselves. The teenager persuades Prometheus to simply confess his desire to Dandler, and he obeys. The Fallen One is furious with the teacher because he lied all the time, promising that the boys would be together. Selene is afraid that they will all die because the acid continues to rise higher and higher. Jan demands the disc, promising to bring reinforcements and save everyone present. Brian reassures them, believing that Prometheus can convince Dandler to surrender. He thinks that everyone around him is crazy, except for him and Senya, and this is already obvious. Yang and Old Shi have long deserved to be punished for their many crimes and machinations. Keelan is just a tool, thoughtlessly used in someone else's selfish plans. Dandler is an innate evil that has received love, but never trusted any human. Prometheus is absolute good, but it is impossible because no one can endure so much torment and remain pure. Maybe something was damaged in him during the brain surgery, but that's why he needs to be around. Dandler is unwilling to let go of his double, clinging to him with all his might so as not to lose him. But he can never become fallen because he lacks anger and accumulated resentment. Prometheus begs to be released, not wanting to live locked in a cramped space again. Eventually, his requests are successful, and the rain stops as if it had never happened. In addition, the gastric juice begins to be absorbed back into the ground, gradually retreating away. Suddenly, a giant tree with Dandler's face on its trunk appears in front of them. The Fallen asks why Brian doesn't kill the three mercenaries standing next to him. He replies that although they represent evil, hypocrisy, and ignorance, he does not want to choose. He explains that it is not up to them to decide whether they deserve to die or not. The creature is surprised because it considers murder to be the easiest way to establish justice. The teenager reminds that the teacher has already deceived him, and there is no guarantee that this will not happen again. Dandler threatens that Brian should take care of his friend if he really wants to keep him. The guy promises to show that not all people in this world are evil and cruel creatures. He asks for more information about Cain, but is categorically refused. The Fallen One says that they will meet again in the future and eventually leaves them. Although Brian learned nothing new, the incident will ruin the relationship between the teacher and Dandler. The teenager gives the teleportation disc to Prometheus, intending to transport himself to the tower with it. He promises to return for the others and orders them to remain where they are while he is gone. However, they will not be able to leave because the branches of the Fallen One are already covering them, preventing them from moving. The system rates the task as excellent because Brian has acquired a strong ally. However, his level does not increase because he has spent too little time in this zone. He thinks that he should stop using the disc so as not to follow Cain's plan. The world outside the tower is vast, and the teacher only has maps of some of its areas. Prometheus bids farewell to Dandler, saying that the boy can always return. Now Brian has to decide what to do with the baby, but he puts it off until later. Meanwhile, in the port of the lower floors of the tower, Wei finishes the voiceover of the broadcast. People are delighted and are eager to see the continuation of Constantine's adventures as soon as possible. When the teenager arrives with Prometheus at the intelligence core, Sen comments negatively on his new appearance. The guy doesn't react, but introduces the child and expresses a desire to involve him in the intelligence unit. The young man writes down information about the boy's abilities, avoiding mentioning them out loud due to the risk of exposure. After reading it, the captain burns the note and orders it to be kept secret from everyone, without exception. Brian's actions show trust in Chin, telling him about Prometheus's regeneration without hesitation. A few hours ago, the system told him additional details about the new ward. His ability is a talent of over 100th level, which will interest people at the government level. Yin and Captain Chin have the same, hiding from the inhabitants of the 6th floor of the tower. Prometheus will be much safer staying close to these experienced allies. Brian reports that Cain is apparently the head of a certain sect operating inside the tower. The child was unable to provide him with any new information without knowing the voice or appearance. The system compares the man to Magneto, the leader of mutants and a fighter for their rights. The teacher also leads the Fallen in a certain way, rallying them around his figure. In all the records, his students respect him immensely, and Dandler, even after the deception, follows him further. While the teenager is pondering, Chin approaches Prometheus and asks his name. The version Brian gave him was too long, and the captain complained about the Corps' task. The young man leaves the boy to the man, thus preparing a disgusting maneuver in advance. Now Cain will decide that it was Chin who fought his student and not anyone else. The captain tells the boy that he now has a student named Wei. A recent case of solving cases in one day has attracted a lot of attention. There is a serious problem on the upper floors, and a call has been made to the containment corps for assistance. Brian, Lin, Wei, and Captain Chin himself will help in the investigation, supporting each other. If they become the best at this, they will be able to destroy the reputation of the restraining corps. The teenager will have the opportunity to walk around the third floor, learning more about it. He has 2 days of vacation left, after which they will head up. The young man leaves, saying goodbye to Xiao, already planning another trip outside the tower. At the last moment, he remembers the 3 mercenaries remaining in the jungle and tells Tsen about them. At the store, Chen tries to seduce Wei by openly flirting with him. When he asks her to calculate his salary, she offers him to become her boyfriend instead of money. The young man agrees, but insists on payment, which irritates the girl and makes her act more decisively. After faking the falls, Chung pulls them both to the floor, beginning to make more overt advances on him. Wei doesn't lose his head, immediately announces the breakup, and demands that he return the money he earned. Earlier, he came running as if he didn't need anything, demonstrating his complete readiness to help. But as soon as it became clear that he was irreplaceable, a demand for payment for his work immediately appeared. Eventually, the girl gives in and takes on a business-like air, beginning to talk seriously about cooperation. Meanwhile, Brian moves around the port, listening to the conversations going on around him about his restraint. The content seems distorted to him, and the system is interested in who Chen found to voice the recording. She also asks why the boy left Keelan after interrogating the 3 mercenaries in the tower. The teenager explains that he is simply stupid and did not know about Jan's crimes, and that he can still improve. Finally, Brian enters the store and sees Chung and Wei bargaining over wages. Although the young man appears to be a simpleton, he is actually quite cunning and prudent in his actions. In the tower, he will become an extremely useful assistant for Brian in completing tasks. Eventually, the girl gives in, and the argument ends with Wei winning the negotiations. Having noticed a teenager, he immediately shows admiration, behaving modestly and obediently on the outside. But all this is just acting for the public, to impress others. Brian remains cold, which surprises his new subordinate and makes him wary. Previously, Wei was told that the teenager was friendly and intelligent, and it was easy to find a common language with him. But now he gives off a depressing aura, causing the young man to feel great discomfort. Brian approaches Chung and demands that the next stream be prepared 7 hours after the release. This time, he intends to increase his accompanying power to defend himself against the fallen and humans. The teenager asks if Wei knows about the investigation they will be conducting together soon. Hearing that they are going to the 3rd floor, Chen is happy and makes a list of the things they need. According to her, it is almost impossible to buy anything there, even with an official entry pass. Brian understands that the aristocracy at the top has complete control over production and resources. Only the remnants fall down, because power and strength maintain such a backward system. The teenager suggests that the first people in the tower gained control of the floors and secured it. He suggests that the girl create a longer list of necessary things, and she readily agrees. After the allotted time, the guy goes outside the tower again, this time heading to the blue zone. Wei and Chung prepare to host a new stream, informing the audience about the upcoming broadcast. Brian finds himself in a zoo, which the system calls a human park, exploring its territory. There are 744 fallen here, and the difficulty is more like the purple zone. This is the worst place to quietly increase stats, as the guy had originally planned. Moving forward, he compares the tower to a cage in which people are raised and controlled. His father once suggested that this could happen to humanity in the future world. The system assumes that he is very similar to Cain, based on the fragments of information it knows. Brian denies, claiming that the master is significantly weaker than his father in every aspect. He encounters a mechanized panda rummaging through a food vending machine. She doesn't react in any way, and the teenager calmly moves on, looking for clues to the zone's puzzle. People who follow him are outraged that once again there are no fights or spectacular scenes. Then several fallen creatures, like ostriches, approach him, blocking his path. He passes them again without any problems, not wanting to interfere in a fight he is already losing. The streamer's courage and decides to sign a contract with him. The man orders that a meeting with Constantine's team be arranged for him as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the guy finds a map, determining in which direction he should move further. A mechanized bird appears above his head, feeding on machine oil. A herd of zebras approaches from over the horizon, their engines roaring and their bodies riddled with electrical wiring. All this is a consequence of mutation, and not artificially created machines, as one might think. Previously, the child believed that gene configurations were caused by certain radiation, but he was wrong. All the information collected at the hospital has now been completely refuted by new observations. Brian is eager to learn more about the nature of the fallen, but this time he came for a walk. He decides to find a safe haven and heads towards the cable cars to avoid the unnecessary. The less he sees, the less desire he will have to explore new, dangerous places. To avoid making the broadcast seem boring, he turns off the recording device and disappears from the broadcast. Wei and Chung are confused and decide to wait, believing that Brian has his own hidden plan. Even 3 hours later, he still doesn't get in touch, making the girl start to get nervous. Suddenly, the restrained one starts up again, but the guy is unlucky and gets a new obstacle. Every 12 minutes without combat, he is given a debuff, forcing him to act actively. He is forced to either fight or become a target of persecution from the fallen enemy. Having resigned himself, he sets off to study the local fauna and chooses a direction for further movement. In the African steppes, all creatures are only looking for lubricating oils, so they will not attack first. In the other direction, there is a house of horrors, but it is too early for him to go there due to a lack of his own strength. Eventually, Brian decides to go to a recreation area where creatures that feed on human blood live. The system reports the presence of a spirit in the form of a telescope on the observation deck. It can only be used outside the tower, and it is impossible to take it with you. In addition, there is a fallen one sleeping there now, a baby rhinoceros, which the guy does not dare to disturb. By accident, he steps on a poster advertising a traveling circus. The system explains that this is a clown troupe from another zone, and that he will meet them in time. The teenager climbs higher, coming across inscriptions dated 2022. Even then, animals that had fallen into decline began to appear, and mechanized animals are direct confirmation of this fact. Brian finally gets to the telescope, learning that it points out one of the enemy's weaknesses. When he looks at it, the talent and the spirit property combine to provide detailed information. The observed creature feeds on fuel and is afraid of fire. Probably the decayed ones retain ancient instincts. The young man tries to take away the telescope, but, as expected, he fails. Then he decides to get to the enemy and engage in battle before he gets a new obstacle. After jumping from the top floor, the teenager remains unharmed thanks to his own collateral strength. The sound of the fall wakes up the rhinoceros, furious at the interruption of his peaceful sleep. But the animal is locked in and cannot break down the door through the fortified buildings outside the tower. However, this is enough to refresh Brian's time counter in the current mission. He heads to a public restroom where an Amazonian anaconda is lurking, ready to attack. Defeating her gives a 45% chance of getting talent 799. Wave interference can disable any mechanical devices after activation. This could come in handy in the tower, so the guy is determined to get this useful skill. To defeat the snake, you need to set it on fire, which means you will have to get closer to it. Once the oil catches fire, it won't have enough speed to get the distance it needs. The system reminds you that it is not necessary to use fire to attack a target. The teenager heads to the cafeteria, having come up with the best way to get rid of the anaconda that was stalking him. There he finds a sleeping lion, and the system encourages him to saddle the fallen predator for further action. The guy comes closer and strokes the mane of the animal that belongs to this dangerous place. He puts on the lion ring found on Dandler, hoping for a positive result. The animal awakens, letting out a loud roar that paralyzes Brian for 10 seconds straight. The very next moment, the fallen one begins to lick the young man, demonstrating his favor towards him. Now the lion perceives him as his own partner, striving to win his favor in return. The teenager sits on the animal's back and orders it to go forward to deal with the anaconda. The people in the tower watch in shock, genuinely amazed by the unexpected developments on the screen. Wei wonders how he could make a lot more money out of this situation. Brian and the Fallen run at full speed, racing towards the public restroom in the zone. The lion is the top of the food chain in the zoo, having a high level of development. The young man is worried that if the ring flies up, the beast will immediately attack and tear him to pieces. He decides to think about it after he gets the valuable talent he wants. An anaconda appears, rushing into a swift attack, trying to hit its prey with a swing. The lion easily bats away its tail with his paw, then pins the snake to the ground with his weight. The reptile wraps itself around the cat's body, squeezing it, and the predator responds with a loud roar that paralyzes it. Thanks to this, he grabs the immobilized snake with his mouth, biting through its neck in one moment. The king of beasts tears out something like a gallbladder located inside the anaconda. The system reports that this is a power core that must be destroyed to kill the mechanized creature. Although, as with 12, Brian did not commit the murder himself, he still gains talent. A guy walks into a public toilet that has retained its appearance for 700 years, but has become a fuel composition. In one of the cabins, he sees inscriptions about the dog returning to take his revenge. At this moment, the young man hears the roar of a lion and runs to find out why the fallen one suddenly became nervous. All the mechanical animals around begin to worry and run away in different directions. Brian sees the bird being hit by an energy beam, nearly destroying its body. A huge creature with dozens of laser guns on its body appears on the horizon. People watching this through the screen are in deep shock. The monster turns out to be a threat level 7 husky, with gigantism and a limitless source of energy. She also carries a piece of the doomsday puzzle, which the young man must obtain by appeasing her. The poor lion is scared and hides behind Brian's back, trying to avoid meeting the dog. Together they hide in the toilet, because the guy understands that he cannot cope with such a creature in battle. While waiting, he discusses the puzzle elements and suggests that each area is guarded by a keeper. In the hospital it was Una, but the system said that the elements had been moved, as well as in the jungle. Kane probably took them, and he needs to be found first, which the guy doesn't plan to do yet. Meanwhile, the husky walks around his territory, keeping an eye on every remote corner. From the inscriptions found, Brian concludes that people wanted to get rid of her, and now she is taking revenge. The young man also reflects that he only encountered fallen animals at the zoo, but not people. This place has its own history, which will be difficult to find out without the clues left by the teacher. He emerges from hiding, riding the lion again, and orders him to follow the husky. The feline is trembling and does not want to deal with the dog, but obeys the order. The system then directs them into the pile of scrap metal left behind by the giant creature's movement. She says that there might be something interesting and potentially useful for their further goal to be found there. Coming closer, the guy sees a figure working with a mechanical antelope. This is an orangutan that repairs damaged fallen ones and restores their functionality. Within a moment, the restored animal stands up again and stands on all fours. It turns out the monkey did this to mate with the shocking antelope. He tries not to look in that direction, feeling very embarrassed by what he saw. The system warns him that he will receive a new obstacle if he does not fulfill the set condition. Brian directs the lion to attack the two captured animals in order to quickly destroy them. He instantly rushes into attack, tearing both creatures to pieces without delay. Meanwhile, the young man reflects on the new information about mutations that he has just received. He suggests that two completely different forces were at work in the year the apocalypse began. After 3 hours, the young man finally levels up and can choose which stat to improve. He has 2 spare points and decides to invest them in strength and restoration of his own resources. The lion fights the rhinoceros, easily winning and tearing the energy core out of the body. At this point, Brian receives a second debuff, Parasitic Hatred, which affects consciousness. The guy's perception changes, and the world now looks completely different to him. A black fog swirls around him, representing the hatred of those around him towards him and his actions. The teenager sees this as an opportunity to learn more about the zoo by listening to the surrounding noise. After another 2 hours, he collects various clues, too disparate to form a complete picture. However, the despair and hatred of the people who made the recordings may help him in this. Brian opens the first diary and dives into the memory, preparing to see the past. In front of him stands a girl who scolds her boyfriend Lo for being late for a date. He explains that he was delayed because of a pregnant zebra he is caring for at the zoo. At first, the girl doesn't like her boyfriend's job and his passion for animals. But then events change, and she asks to get her and her brother a job at the zoo. They can't find work, and Lo agrees, promising to help. He really does fulfill his promise, and now the girl works as an administrator, and the brother as a security guard. Later, Lo helps the zebra give birth, and the birth is successful, with a baby born. The memory ends here, leaving Brian surprised by the lack of mention of the dog. He goes into his work journal, continuing his reading and searching for the necessary facts. Lu angrily storms into his girlfriend Jian's office, dragging her brother along with him. He sold baby animals on the black market, but he was stopped in time. The guard doesn't repent at all. He wanted to earn money to get into the tower. This angers Lu, but the other man presses him, asking if he wants happiness for Jian. Deer and rhinoceros antlers, tiger or cheetah teeth and skins. All of this will bring untold riches. It then turns out that the girl knew about this and helped in the illegal trade. Several zoo workers discuss the tower, and one recalls that there used to be another one. But the government destroyed all records of it, and the new one was called Noah's Ark for humanity. The old man reasons that they should agree to Jian and her brother's scam and sell the animals. He wants to get into the tower too, and the others agree with him, except for the stubborn Lo. One worker suggests grabbing him and tying him up so he doesn't interfere and call the police. He is supported, and the men decide to immediately implement their plan without delay. When Lo goes to visit a family of zebras, he is attacked from behind, taking them by surprise. Another memory ends, again without giving any information about the husk. Brian assumes that Lo is the dog's owner and decides not to waste time guessing. He opens the next entries to continue his search and gather the necessary information. The prisoner is brought into a dark and dirty room with meager food covered in mold and an unpleasant smell. This is Jian, who has come to feed Lu, who is locked in a warehouse in a remote part of the zoo. She says that in 3 months they will have saved up enough money and will be living in the tower. These words irritate the man, and he tries to convince her to abandon this plan. He claims that the authorities will soon notice their machinations, and the law will put a harsh stop to it. Brother Xian laughs, because now all the power is also busy trying to get into the tower. His sister reassures him and they leave, leaving Lo to ponder what he has heard. Old Lu comes to her husband, hoping to convince him to join the others. He says that the zoo has been without funding for a week now, and the animals will die anyway. Lo asks to be let out to see his charges, especially the little zebra. But old Lu cannot fulfill this request, even despite his persistent words. Over time, animals began to mutate and change their appearance and behavior. The system explains that due to lack of food and care, their restlessness increased, and they became fallen. The panda tries to attack one of the keepers, causing him great fear. But Brother Xian reassures everyone, pointing out the changes even in the metal bars. He sees the benefit in this, because there will be buyers for the new species of modified animals. The husband asks if Lo has been rebellious lately while he was being kept under lock and key. He sat in the warehouse without ventilation for almost 2 months, turning it into a breeding ground for diseases. He feels very bad. His body is covered in ulcers and abscesses, but he dreams of seeing his animals again. Suddenly, the scene changes, and he finds himself in front of a family of lions who greet him joyfully. Brian speculates that Lo has gone fallen and killed all the people working at the zoo. Then the guy pays attention to another memory, preserved in the recordings for viewing. In it, Xian asks his brother if he posted a photo of the mutated panda online. Now everyone wants to see the fallen beasts and is actively trying to buy tickets. But there is a problem, because there have been no visitors for a long time, and they have already sold 1/3 of the animals. This will definitely be noticed. Besides, Lo poses a threat to their plans and safety. Cien then suggests killing Lu to finally settle the matter with him. Old Man Lu suggests just letting him go, but no one supports this suggestion. Finally, the girl makes a decision and orders to deal with Lo by any means necessary. Her brother promises to do everything quickly and cleanly, leaving no witnesses. The man was carried out into the field to the lions, where they tore him to pieces during an attack. Zoo workers then tried to shoot the animals, but were unsuccessful. Brian realizes that his initial conclusion was wrong and Lo did not become a fallen one. He died because of the machinations of his girlfriend and not from his own transformation or mutation. The guy finally finds out where the dog he was interested in had been all this time. All the rewatched memories belonged to a husky who was with her owner from start to finish. In her last moments of life, the dog saw people with guns pointed at her. This is why her body is now covered in firearms, which have become part of his uniform. Lo actually committed suicide and doesn't understand how this is possible. The system reports that 12 minutes have passed, and he gets a new obstacle: weakening in water. The young man ignores this, trying to understand the background of the zoo and the events of the past. The only useful thing he found out was the dog's nickname, Gorbushka, which was important for further search. Now he has two different limbs, contradicting each other and confusing his conclusions. The system indicates that some memories are in color and others are black and white, but all have the same image. Brian realizes that the first two contain Lo's emotions, while the rest contain the dog's own negativity. The teenager finally realizes what really happened, restoring the full picture of events. At this moment, the shadows thicken in front of him, forming the figure of a man in impenetrable darkness. She clings to his body under the effect of the parasitic hatred debuff, affecting him. Brian notices that although the ring's effect is almost gone, the lion does not attack and looks very scared. Even though all of Lo's killers are long dead, he still has unfinished business. The observers at the port are stunned as the young man's body merges with the shadows of hatred around him. Chen is worried, afraid that Brian might hurt himself using such force. The teenager cuts off the broadcast, seeking to keep the rest of his research a secret. He mounts the lion again, directing the fallen one towards the husky, and this time, the beast obeys. In the past, this predator saw his relatives feasting on a familiar dog. He recognizes the one that has always been hanging around with the man, but something strange is clearly happening to her. Leo wants to call Lo to help her, but people start shooting at the husky to no effect. The dog goes, but before doing so, it looks at the predator, leaving him confused. Then the lion thought that she would not return, but then she came and trapped everyone. The husky kills everyone in his path, including the lioness who was the fallen lion's mate. Now the boy on the beast's back suddenly takes on the appearance of Lo, which surprises even him. The system explains to Brian that he is lucky, because everyone else would have already gone mad with hatred. This even works to his advantage, because now he understands what to do and how to get through this zone. Lo, despite all the betrayals and insults, still continues to love this world without losing warmth. For Sparrow, everything is different. After the death of his owner, the dog sees light only in monochrome. They arrive at the husky, and Brian calls her by name, much to the frightened lion's surprise. The dog stops for the first time in 700 years, and the guy confidently walks towards her. A young man, drained from Lo's, calls the dog and sees what really happened in the compound during her imprisonment. Lo puts his hands on himself, and the dog spends several days trying to get attention or run away. Eventually, Sparrow becomes weakened and is forced to begin eating his host's body in order to survive. Brian recalls a report of an experiment where animals quickly decided to eat the body of their sitter. Only the dogs hesitated a little, but then they also began to devour their dead master. During her imprisonment, Sparrow survived only because Lo shared food with her. After the owner's death, no one fed the dog, and it continued to slowly die of hunger. When the lions ate the man and the husky, they were already dead. Hatred and guilt turned the dog into another creature, changed by pain and his own fears. She regrets having to eat her master and wishes that the story of them being killed together was true. Brian pets Sparrow, Acknowledging his suffering and trying to comfort the tortured beast, he gives Lo a chance to fulfill his last wish, to say goodbye and fire his favorite. The husband forgives the husky, saying that he never blamed her for what happened. Master and dog are together again, calming the images and leaving the past behind. Lo thanks Sparrow for being able to take revenge on everyone who caused him pain. They both dissolve, free of hatred, leaving only memories of their devotion. Before disappearing, the dog leaves Brian an eye, which is part of an important mystery. The young man understands that this story has nothing to do with Cain, but human nature is still corrupted. He examines the artifact, and the system explains that it is the first piece of the Doomsday Puzzle. To complete it, he needs to find 3 more parts: an ear, a nose, and a mouth, scattered throughout the zones. Once he collects everything, he will receive 4 buffs: removal of interference, purification from monsters, and others. Among them are also the elimination of unnatural rules and the ability to hear the voices of the fallen. Brian suggests that the ear is hidden in the circus, the mouth in the amusement park, and the nose in the House of Horrors. He wonders if the area will be cleared after collecting the parts, or if other dangerous effects will occur. The system says that all parts form a whole, and the whole is part of an even greater whole. So far, he only has the cleansing of the fallen in this zone, as well as a ban on attacks. At first, the young man wants to test his strength on the lion, but quickly changes his mind, fearing for his life. A teenager asks the system if the world outside the tower will be habitable after all the pieces are collected. He doesn't get an answer, so he drops the subject and sits on the lion, asking to be taken to the tropical forests. But the beast does not move, too frightened by Brian becoming the owner of the eye, and refuses to move forward. Although it's inconvenient, the zoo is now safe for leveling, and he plans to return here. To do this, he wants to use the teleportation disc to quickly get to the desired area. But teleportation is only possible in the order that Cain originally recorded in his data. So first you need to go through all the areas he added to remove information about them. The young man does not yet want to face what the teacher has prepared and puts off this part of the plan. Chien once did. When it's time to receive a new debuff, it activates a delayed teleport at the ready. If the restriction is easy, he will simply cancel the move and continue his experiment. This time, he gets a gravity imbalance that makes his body feel light, too heavy. Brian quickly adapts to this and has no trouble maintaining control over his own movements. Next comes photophobia, when the sun's rays burn the skin. But this is not a problem either. Some time passes, and he overcomes all the restrictions he has received without any particular complications. But after 7 hours, he gains bloodlust, where he loses health without killing every 6 minutes. This can't be done at the zoo, so he decides it's time to return to the tower. He leveled up quite well, equivalent to about 5 days of leveling. Activates the teleportation disc, receiving a satisfactory grade from the system for completing the zoo. Chen brings Captain Chin, Wei, and Lin to Brian's apartment in the tower to discuss business. They see that he keeps the place clean, and Lin believes it is because he moved in recently. The girl tries to flirt with him, but the officer doesn't even look in her direction, calling her ugly. This causes her to have a crisis, and Chung is tense after a 4-hour interrogation conducted by Chin himself. Now she is among men who are distant and show no interest in her at all. The captain offers him a position in the rear department of the Foreign Intelligence Corps unit. She immediately agrees, understanding the benefit, and now her broadcasts with Brian are under the control of Price. At this moment, the teenager himself returns and sees an unexpected crowd of people in his apartment. He immediately turns to the captain, ignoring the others, and asks the reason for their arrival. The man reports that their documents have been approved, and they have received the rights of second-order aristocracy. Lin explains that they now have access to the third-floor entertainment and shopping opportunities. However, the prices there will be a quarter higher, so Chen advises Brian not to buy the items on his list. The system is designed in such a way that the poor become poorer, and the rich even richer. The group will work with a containment unit where everyone is at least level 2. Lin mocks the boy, implying that he is weaker and not worth much attention. Brian says he's gone up almost 2 levels, shocking everyone in the room. Lin notes that it took him 6 months to reach level 3, which is considered the passing level. The officer continues to try to hit the teenager, but he confidently repels all his attacks. Finally, Brian takes a serious tone and asks about the nature of the investigation they have been assigned. The captain says the case is more complicated than he expected and involves the kidnapping of a hostage. She is from the upper crust of the 4th floor, but her parents live on the 5th. The young man is surprised because she disappeared on the 3rd, and now the intelligence service from the 2nd is handling the case. Sen explains that many of the children from the 5th floor live on the level below for various reasons. The girl was on the 3rd one because that's the only one there is a mental hospital. The kidnapped mentally ill woman has information about her, but the containment unit does not share it. Formally, intelligence helps, but in reality it is more of a competition than a joint effort. The captain only knows the location of the hospital and the time of the child's disappearance, which occurred a week ago. All records and evidence were destroyed by the restraining detachment, considering the rivalry more important. Brian analyzes the data and realizes that the target could be on the 3rd, 4th, or 5th floors. They have no right to rise above 3rd, so the case seems almost hopeless. They can't refuse, and Chin expresses faith in Brian and high hopes for him. Although the situation is dire, the young man smiles, feeling intrigued by the mystery. He asks why the captain took Lin with him and not Yin, who is better at such things. He hears the answer that the girl doesn't know how to quarrel at all, and this may be needed during the investigation. Lin, on the other hand, has a poor attitude towards strangers, remaining rude and overly self-confident. The officers leave, agreeing to meet in the morning at the elevator, leaving Brian to rest. Wei and Chung, who remain with him, show a graph of the income from the last broadcast. The next day, the 4 of them are taken up in a huge elevator, which looks more like an entire room. The young man wonders why the holding core feels as strong as the intelligence core. Due to constant forays, the second one should be much more powerful, but this is not observed. Sen explains that the lower and middle restraining layers are indeed weaker, and the upper one is completely different. As the only organization, intelligence wins, but the top restraint wins the annual tournament. The strongest one is selected from each division, after which they compete with each other. Last time, 11 of the 16 intelligence candidates failed. Each captain of the restrainer has a high level of accompanying strength and talents above 300, and sometimes close to 100. Every year they bring in new blood, and almost all of the newcomers are real geniuses. At the same time, Captain Chin has won first place in the tournament for 2 years in a row. Brian feels suspicious, because it seems strange that so many rare talents have gathered together. Finally, the group arrives at the 3rd floor of the tower, which is significantly different from the 2nd level. Skyscrapers tower all around. The sky is blue and cars are driving along the roads. Sen stops a taxi, intending to go straight to the mental hospital for a checkup. Although people call it that, it was originally a rehabilitation center for patients. At the site, they are met by 2 of the holding core, who immediately throw out barbed remarks. Lin doesn't wait long and immediately responds to them, thus igniting a verbal altercation. His images unsettle one of the men, Joe, who throws punches. Chin manages to intervene in time, stopping him and not allowing a fight to start. The captain asks them to calm down and provide all the clues they have. He and other members of the group are ridiculed as brainless and accused of falsifications. Brian, who had been watching silently until now, decides to intervene and support the discussion. With the help of the system, he finds dirt on a man named Dean, who has a mistress. The teenager carefully spins his opponent, hinting at his cheating on his wife behind her back. Finally, he points directly to the hickey on his neck, which is peeking out from under the collar of his shirt. Watching this, the guy's companions have fun, but Dean begins to get noticeably nervous. The young man hints that he might accidentally tell about it, and then everyone will quickly find out the truth. He says it's better to cooperate with intelligence, then he'll keep his mouth shut. A stunned Dean falls to his knees, and Joe rushes to support him. Meanwhile, the reconnaissance group passes through the gate unhindered and continues on to its destination. Lin praises the teenager for how he scared the man, deciding to ignore the insult directed at him this time. Brian notes that the walls in the hospital look more like prison walls than medical facilities. Sen explains that many influential political figures are kept here in order to get rid of those who are undesirable. After scanning the pass, everyone goes inside, and the system reports that the walls are 6 meters thick. The little girl could not have escaped on her own, which means that she was definitely kidnapped by unknown people. The captain warns that from now on, they will be closely watched and not lost sight of. The teenager just smiles, noting that this has its benefits for them. The group sees many madmen on the territory, but there is not a single doctor near them. Finally, a man in a robe stops them and asks which building they are from and why they came. Sen is already starting to answer, but Brian stops him, intervening in the conversation. At this moment, a nurse appears behind the stranger, scolding him for stealing his robe. The girl greets the group and asks who they are, and upon learning about the investigation, takes them to her room. Suddenly, Brian starts acting strangely, commenting on the nurse's figure. Once in the elevator, he begins to flirt with her, surprising the rest of the team. When the girl leaves, Lin pounces on him, asking what just happened. The guy mocks his lack of understanding, but Chin interrupts them. The captain and Wei guess the teenager's true intentions in this situation. Together with his protege, Brian enters 2 adjacent rooms, checking the soundproofing of the walls. It turns out to be extremely high quality. Sounds hardly penetrate into the room. The captain shares that there are only 4 patients on the floor, 2 next to Miss Yan and 1 further away. To find out more, the group will have to interrogate the girl's neighbors and the staff. More compelling evidence has long since been taken into the hands of the restraining corps. Brian says the man in the lab coat they came across downstairs was a real doctor. There is not a single consciousness within the hospital walls. Everyone has gone crazy, including this doctor. Real doctors and staff monitor everything via CCTV cameras. If there really were any medical treatment here, it would not be a suitable place to hold important prisoners. The nurse was so immersed in her role that she didn't even react to Brian's advances. Lin praises the guy's acting, admitting that he didn't even realize he was deceiving him. To this, Brian states that he was not pretending and that he really likes long legs and a big bust. The guy knocks on the door, asking to open the door so he can talk to his neighbor for the whole mission. The system reports that the patient inside suffers from hypochondriacal syndrome. When the man shows up, he immediately asks if Brian has come from 700 years ago. He claims that he came from the past into a crazy body, and no one believes him. The teenager notices books about the time agent scattered around the room, realizing the root of the problem. Lin becomes disillusioned and prepares to leave, deciding that the patient will not be of any use. But at this point, Brian begins to play along with the patient, supporting his fictitious story. He says that he believes him and asks them to speak more quietly so that they are not considered crazy. The guy lies that there is a portal hidden in the next room, but first he needs to find the girl. He weaves it into a fictional legend, and the interlocutor happily takes up the story. The man begins to tell fictitious facts about the missing person that they are looking for. Lin doesn't understand why Brian is communicating with the patient if he is clearly dreaming. Whitey explains that these are 2 witnesses at once, whom the containment corps was unable to get to talk. 10 minutes later, the teenager ends the conversation and says goodbye to her husband. He learns that Miss Yan loved to draw and write in her diary, but the notes have already been taken away. Now he goes into another room, but as soon as he knocks, the door immediately opens. Inside, he is greeted by a huge man, once a soldier who saved lives outside the tower. But all his merits were attributed to others, and he was sent to the madmen who broke his mind. Brian does not interrogate him, but instead suggests that he examine the missing room. Currently, the captain of the 3rd Division of the Containment Corps is monitoring the reconnaissance team through cameras. Dean informs him that Brian could be a bigger problem than even Chin himself. The man is not worried, because even the best investigator cannot do anything without evidence. Despite this, he is interested in the guy and is trying to lure him into his corps. Dean enthusiastically supports the idea, because then his own secret will remain safe. He then asks how they can put this plan into practice. The captain notes that the young man is very smart and insightful, but at the same time lustful, and this can be taken advantage of. On camera, they see Brian say that he already has several ideas of where to look for the girl, But when he starts to explain in more detail, the video freezes and interrupts the broadcast. The captain becomes wary, realizing that the guy must have found some important clue. He asks if they managed to find out anything from the diaries that they had already managed to check. Ding confirms, revealing that Miss Yan had been in contact with an influential person in the center. The captain doesn't like something about this. He senses a catch and starts to get nervous. The man orders a subordinate to find more information on Brian to gain an advantage. He replies that he is already working on this task and intends to complete it. A little earlier, having entered the girl's room, the young man begins to carefully search her room. He sniffs the blanket, checks the stuffed toy, but in reality it is a decoy for observers. However, the guy does find something important during his thorough inspection of things. He notes the titles of books that talk about surviving outside the tower and fighting the fallen. It looks like she disappeared, wanted to get out, or was already preparing for it in advance. Wei notices a smile line drawn on the mirror with lipstick. Brian advises to sit opposite, and then the meaning of this will become completely clear. By doing this, they see that the line is just at the level of the lips, creating the appearance of a smile. The teenager shows the book Smile and Find Happiness, and quotes the madman's words about Yan not smiling. She probably practiced pretending to look happy without feeling any real emotion. Perhaps she had not experienced happiness for a long time, or was unable to do so at all. We notes that in that case, leaving the tower would be a death sentence for her. Moreover, the walls of the hospital itself are too high and thick to climb without help. Thinking it over, Brian begins to piece together what happened. He turns off the talent he used earlier that was interfering with the cameras and talks about leads. As he leaves the room, the teenager notices that the containment corps will now be interested in him. Sen says that he has already contacted the service bureau, which will take care of solving this problem. They are about to check on the third and final witness on the floor when they hear a noise. Someone shouts that there is a fallen in the building, attracting the attention of everyone around. Lin explains to Brian that this is impossible because the monsters disappear once they enter the tower. But the voice sounds too real, and the captain rushes forward, standing in front of the victim. Before he can do anything, he is stopped by his subordinates. In front of the group stands a short man with a very strange and unnatural appearance. Suddenly, the door opens behind him, and the fake doctors rush after him, calling him Fallen. The system reports that this is an internet celebrity who brought great profits to the aristocrats. But when he was no longer useful, he was sent to the hospital as unnecessary. Brian suggests leaving, noting that they won't find anything else here. Wei suggests interrogating the staff because they might have something really important to say. The teenager refuses, explaining that Yan has either already left the tower or is somewhere on the third floor. The first can be determined by providing an indication of weight and height, determined from the things in the room. If it is in the tower, then all the keys to the case are kept by the holding corps. Only patients can provide important information, but there is no need to rush into an investigation. Brian says that if there is a chance to weaken Captain Ching and solve the case, the other side will not be able to resist. After exiting the elevator, he heads towards the exit, planning to visit an entertainment establishment. The young man allegedly wants to look at beautiful girls before getting back to business. As he leaves, he advises the others to stick together and keep an eye on what's happening in the hospital. With the three of them left, the captain orders Wei to interrogate the patients in the courtyard of the hospital complex. At the same time, he and Lin return to the floor where Yan's room is located for examination. They plan to talk to her last neighbor, having been distracted earlier by the incident with the fallen one. Having reached the right door, the men see that they are wrapped in chains, something they had not noticed before. From inside, screams are heard, in which the prisoner claims that he is not a crazy patient. Lin suggests opening the chamber, and the captain agrees, allowing the metal chains to be torn off. When the deed is done, the doors along with part of the wall fly to the side, hitting Lin with force. A huge man in shackles emerges from the gap, stepping heavily forward onto the floor. He says he went to the hospital specifically to meet Sen. He was hired by an unknown person to kill the captain, and his talent is suitable against fast enemies. Sen orders Lin to destroy all surveillance cameras, while he prepares for the inevitable battle. The observing containment corps is surprised because this man is not from their unit. The picture on the screens disappears, but the sound remains, and they continue limited surveillance. The enemy uses an ability on Price that makes the body heavy and does not allow him to even move. The captain recognizes talents. The first one reduces speed, strength, and recovery, and the second one creates supergravity. This really weakens him, and Chin asks who exactly hired this dangerous rival. He doesn't answer, but rushes into the attack, covering his body with steel with a new skill. Despite the negative effects, the captain easily dodges, shocking the attacker with his speed. Sen concludes that the man injected himself with an emotion-suppressing serum available only to the intelligence corps. Now he is in a state of hyperactivity, reminiscent of a berserker in the midst of a fierce battle. The captain has some guesses, but he demands that the enemy himself confess and confirm their veracity. Instead, the opponent tries to strike again, but misses again. Ding is amazed and asks the chief how Chin can fight if the talents were supposed to tie him up. Until now, none of the geniuses who came down from the 5th floor have been able to defeat the intelligence captain. He is too unpredictable and definitely has a second talent that he carefully hides. However, there is no evidence of this, only suspicions and indirect signs that raise doubts. In the past, the two corps agreed to keep capabilities above number 100 a secret. Do not investigate or spread rumors about the owner to avoid consequences. If they appear, both sides are obliged to do everything to suppress them. The holding and reconnaissance corps may fight, but this rule is immutable. If a true genius appears in intelligence, it is better to die behind the walls of the tower than to disappear above. However, Senya may have a widespread, but very useful and well-developed talent. Meanwhile, the fight continues, and the man is unable to hit the captain with any blow. He has 3 minutes left to win, otherwise the side effect will drive him crazy. Sen advises the enemy to stop using the talent, calling him by the nickname Elder. Lin notices that the serum's backlash has already begun to take effect, causing the man to become weaker. He's raging because no one should be able to move while under the effect of both of his abilities at the same time. The captain says that 2 years before his appointment, the best fighters had been disappearing from the intelligence corps. His opponent attacks in desperation, ordering him to shut up and not continue this conversation. Sen calmly evades, continuing to speak as if nothing is happening. It turned out that the people left on their own, going up to the 4th floor and joining the cult of the Tower God. The captain asks if the man was sent by the head of the organization, but he tries to kill him again. Chen pins the enemy to the floor, promising not to kill him because he was once in the intelligence corps. An elder is a captain's worst enemy, as water is to a flame. But a drop does not extinguish the fire. Chen has a sequence of talents that makes him very fast and strong in combat. His enemy is indeed a talented fighter, and the captain regrets that he has become a pathetic cultist. The elder flies into a rage, praising his leader and trying to strike again. Sen dodges this time too, after which the opponent finally loses consciousness on the floor. Lin asks what cult exactly they were talking about, and the captain grimly explains it to him. In the past, when the end of the world came, not only the poor suffered, but also the aristocracy. Religious organizations appeared that calmed the nobility and took power into their hands. The cult of the Tower God is located on the 4th floor and is known, but almost nothing is known about its structure. Meanwhile, Brian is taken in by the club, continuing to play the role of a pervert in order to avoid suspicion. One of the members of the holding corps secretly follows him, watching his every move. The guy is well aware of the surveillance and plans to hunt for big game. He hands the bartender a large sum of money, asking for the company of several attractive girls. He spends half an hour with 2 women without getting offended, in order to maintain his game. Finally, the trap is sprung, and the captain of the containment corps appears for a private conversation. All this time, Brian pretended to be a pervert, so that they could try to bribe him for certain purposes. The system introduces him to a man named Min, known for his skill at negotiation. He chases the women away, and the teenager angrily expresses his dissatisfaction with his actions. When an offer comes to join the restraining detachment, the young man refuses with contempt. To fertilize him, Min brings with him gifts that may change his mind. The officer next to the man drops his disguise, revealing himself to be an unusually beautiful woman. The captain asks Brian if he likes what he sees, and the boy answers in the affirmative. Later, while drinking, the guy says that although the young girls are beautiful, there is nothing to grab onto from them. It's a completely different matter with women with curves and experience who make a special impression on him. The teenager presses on Mina's weakness, which he learned from the system, adding that someone else's wife is even better. The captain promises to take him to an elite establishment where there will definitely be someone to Brian's taste. Finally, the man begins to cautiously try to find out information about the investigation. The young man refuses, citing a prohibition on disclosure, but a beauty nearby intervenes. Pretending to give in, the guy begins to tell a lie, adding a few true facts. The system intervenes, asking why he is telling so much, suspecting him of being in love. Brian explains that he didn't say anything important, but that it will increase the level of trust in him. Now he himself begins to find out answers from Min, gradually ending his pretense. The teenager does not ask questions, but only makes assumptions, each of which turns out to be accurate. He knows that the analysis of the diary has yielded nothing, and there is no information about activity outside the tower. The guy says the investigation is going down the wrong path and he has theories, but he needs proof. Brian promises to share clues if he is shown Yan's diary to review. Min asks if the young man has informed Captain Sen of his opinions, and hears a negative answer. The teenager explains that he wanted to solve the case immediately, without wasting time on intermediate steps. He compares the investigation to a puzzle where you don't have to see all the pieces to put it together. But there are situations when even the smallest detail can change all perceptions, as happened this time. Min promises that if Brian helps solve the case, he will raise it from the second floor forever. The young man feigns enthusiasm, completely deceiving the man and making him believe his words. The system becomes curious to see how much revenge he will take when he finds out that he was simply used. A few hours later, Captain Min gives Brian a map to a nearby hotel room and an address for tomorrow. After this, the man leaves, entrusting the boy to the woman who remained with him in the club. As soon as the horizon becomes clear, the teenager pretends to feel ill and runs away unnoticed. He makes his way back to the mental hospital through the alleys, but a thug blocks his way. The young man doesn't have time to do anything before he uses his ability, completely paralyzing the body. Before losing consciousness, Brian notices steel hands grabbing him like a sack. The attacker reports by phone that the goods have been seized and delivered to their destination. The system reports that on the other end is a high-ranking woman from a religious organization. The young man should think about his trump cards, otherwise he will die before he has time to do anything. He wakes up in an abandoned room with rusty meat hooks hanging from the ceiling. But in a world where even rice is not grown, there can be no real slaughterhouse. Upon closer inspection, Brian realizes that the bags contain human corpses, not animal carcasses. He must get out quickly if he does not want to become one of those hanging there. The system explains that the cult wants to eat him, considering him the best meat from the Blue Zone. Since he is alive, it is likely that the members of the organization observe certain rituals and ceremonies. The young man was left lying in the middle of the room, and no one was felt around him. Perhaps whoever grabbed him is confident that the ability will not allow him to move. This could play into Brian's hands and be his only chance to escape from this place. He takes out the ring, wondering if it could charm the enemy, but decides not to risk it. His final trump card is the 12th talent, which absorbs the stats of those he eats. But there are many contradictions in the description, and the young man is not sure how this ability works. Besides, he doesn't know how strong the person who caught him is, and he might not make it in time. The time for reflection runs out, and the enemy appears holding a loud chainsaw in his hands. Just by looking at him, Brian realizes that the difference in levels between them is too great. The system encourages him by promising to find the enemy's weak spot to attack. Finally, she reports that the big guy is inferior in strength to the teenager, having the level of a knight in the sewers. The enemy uses an ability, instantly weakening Brian, and rendering him unable to act. If he doesn't manage to do something, his entire body, except for his heart, will turn into bloody mincemeat. At the last moment, the young man exclaims a proposal to kill him more aesthetically, noting the importance of this. He then tries to convince the enemy that he also wants to join the cult and serve it. The man just smiles and swings his chainsaw at the guy, trying to get him. At the last moment, the hostile ability is turned off, and the teenager is able to move again. He manages to dodge, and the blade almost cuts off his hand, leaving a deep wound. Thanks to the recovery, the wound on his shoulder begins to heal, but he cannot move his arm. Brian takes off running and hiding between the bags to avoid direct eye contact. Now the enemy is unable to use the talent because it requires eye contact. The guy attacks the enraged big guy from behind, grabbing him by the neck and dragging him down. They fall to the floor, and the child takes advantage of the opportunity, biting into the flesh and activating the skill. He screams and tries to pull Brian away as the ability begins to transfer to the guy. Thanks to the supplement, the wound on my shoulder has almost healed, and the level has increased by 1 level. There is no point in devouring the enemy further, since it will not give any additional bonuses. Previously, the man demonstrated the possession of 3 talents, but Brian did not receive any. He concludes that the enemy actually had no abilities, and the system confirms this. The big guy's phone rings and the teenager sees an incoming contact called Lady. He picks up the phone, greeting the woman on the other end, but hears only silence in response. Then the young man continues talking, noting that she did not hang up, which means she wants something. She finally responds, asking about her husband, for whom she is now very worried. Brian confirms that he has already dealt with him and asks to be accepted into the cult. He says that he has an idea of their leader's talent, called Ability Number 101. This is a legion that allows you to temporarily transfer your own skills to other people in the group. Once the gift expires, the recipient loses some of its accompanying power to the owner. There is a rare chance that the talent will remain forever, as probably happened with the Sewer Knight. Brian can easily imagine the speech of the leader of the organization convincing others to follow him. Although uninteresting, the cult may be connected to the legend of the tower and have valuable information. The teenager presses further, convincing him that he could become a very profitable member of the group. The woman replies that he will have to pass a certain test to gain admission. He will be contacted later and will be able to try his luck at a new task. The aristocrat asks how the guy knew about their leader's talent in all its details. He briefly explains his findings as he heads towards the exit of the building where he was brought. He is ordered to keep the phone with him, because it is the one that will be called later. Brian agrees, beginning to sing praises to the cult leader, after which the call is disconnected. When the child goes outside, he sees that he is at a manufacturing facility with many workers. He calmly walks past people who pay no attention to him at all. Now he needs to meet the captain as soon as possible to tell him all the news. At the rehabilitation center, Chin tells Lum about the attack on him and asks him to take the culprit to the building. They speculate about what the original intent behind such actions was and whether they are connected to the abduction of Yan. The captain wants to know Brian's opinion, and Lum supports this, eager to meet the boy again. Sen suggests that he is now communicating with the people of the containment core, and Lin scoffs at this. He adds that the young man may be having fun with the girls, but at that moment he enters the hospital. His appearance causes a stir, and the captain immediately realizes that he is being attacked by a cult. Sen examines Brian for serious injuries, feeling guilty about what happened. He blames himself, believing that he should have guessed about the danger that awaited the guy. The teenager reassures him, asking how the containment core feels about the cult. It turns out they just turn a blind eye to it because the organization is too powerful to act. Besides, the stronghold is on the 4th floor, where they have no authority. Sen advises Brian to hide on the lowest floor where chaos reigns, but does not insist. He asks how the conversation with the containment core went, and the guy shares his success. He says that he has gained Min's trust, and the captain calls this man one of the most adequate. Sen notes that following him can bring considerable benefits, but the young man does not want to leave intelligence. He suddenly declares that he doesn't mind even if the guy works on both sides at the same time. At the end, he adds that the teenager will sleep in the room next to his own that night. The captain also orders that the blame for the attack be placed on the holding corps in order to cover his tracks. The system comments that this may actually be a smart and strategically beneficial move. The next day, Brian arrives at Mina's estate, where he is already reporting on the investigation of yesterday's events. He immediately shares information that behind everything was the cult of the Tower God, known for its cruelty. Now, several people from the Containment Corps have been given the task of guarding the teenager at all times. After this, the conversation turns to the investigation, and the guy is shown the materials left by Yan. Surviving, extremely detailed painting. Brian requires a magnifying glass because there are a huge number of small elements depicted on the canvas. Below are depicted fallen figures, based on images from books the girl read. Although the painting is very detailed, it is actually only an idea of what the tower might look like from the outside. The teenager wonders whether the children of aristocrats receive an education in society at all. If a person from the third floor or higher is wealthy enough, he will be able to enroll his child in school. Then Brian notes that the girl is a real genius, and it's surprising how she could end up in a mental hospital. Min advises against asking certain questions, and he himself admits that he does not know certain answers. Putting this aside, the young man continues to examine the picture, remembering the sloppy streak on the mirror. The system intervenes, explaining that this was a landmark and that the strip needs to be matched to the picture. Having done this mentally, the boy realizes that the rings on the hands of several fallen ones have meaning. Next, Brian looks through the notes and sketches, which contain nothing particularly important. He is more interested in the girl's personal diary, although the mentions of the fourth floor have been removed. As he reads it, he finds a description of a conversation with a patient whose thoughts resemble those of Cain. If it was he who took Yan away, then she is most likely already outside the tower. The rings in the painting probably indicate the code of the zone the girl is currently in. The problem is that the code expires in 3 days, and much more has passed. Brian could use the travel disc, but then he would have to clear out all the other areas. By that time, the girl will have already turned into a fallen one and will become dangerous. All of the guy's preliminary conclusions turned out to be false, and the analysis should be rerun. He recalls all the known details, trying to understand how exactly Yan can be found. According to the diary, she was skeptical of Cain's speeches and views. At the same time, she left clues on the mirror and the painting, as if she wanted to be found. But if it had been a cry for help, she wouldn't have made everything so confusing and complicated. Therefore, it is rather a commission, a matter within another, hiding its own meaning. Min gets Brian's attention, asking if he managed to find out anything new. He shares the conclusion that the girl is outside the tower, and the painting contains an encrypted code. If the code is valid, they may enter the blue zone or even more dangerous. To deal with this, someone strong and experienced is needed, including Captain Chin. While there is still a chance, the young man insists on testing his theory and leaving the tower to explore. He intends to examine everything that resembles Ming and may provide new clues. The man wishes him luck and says that he already considers Brian one of his allies. The teenager confirms that he wants to maintain cooperation and will accept Tsen only as a guard. Arriving at the first floor Steelies, 2 intelligence officers prepare to head out. They are contacted by Lum, under whose temporary command Lin and Wei have been transferred. Now, he will be the one handling the affairs in the hospital, monitoring the situation on the spot. After cutting off the connection, Brian clarifies what will happen if they find out the secret about the man from the 5th floor. The captain reassures him, saying that even if they become enemies, they will immediately find allies. Although the Containment and Intelligence Corps have differences, their leaders have a common enemy. If they are united, it means that revealing the secret is more important than any conflicts or disputes. Sen enters the code and it works, but the system reacts unexpectedly. The white stele suddenly glows purple, and the captain orders Brian to prepare for battle. The teleportation works, and the teenager suddenly opens his eyes already inside the plane in the sky. A voice over the intercom announces a zone of turbulence and calls for seatbelts to be fastened. Dean reports the events to his superior, raising many new questions. Min tries to figure out how the purple zone code got into the painting and lasted for so long. The subordinate notes that this may even be for the best, since if Tsenya dies, they will be rid of the enemy. But in reality, the captain does not pose much of a threat due to his honest and straightforward nature. At the same time, humanity may lose an irreplaceable warrior, one of the strongest alive. If Chin dies, Lum will definitely cause chaos and serious problems. However, even if they survive and find Yan, this could also become a source of new problems. The system tells Brian that in 3 minutes the plane will explode, destroying everything on board. The declining are sitting in chairs around him, and he is in the purple danger zone. If for any reason the plane starts to descend, they will end up right in the red zone. Fortunately, the monsters nearby are only at level 3 mutation and do not pose a mortal threat. The teenager stands up, planning to go to business class and find Chin and Yan there. But as soon as he moves, the creature in the next chair reacts, and everyone watches him. The fallen begin to attack, but the boy easily dodges for now, thinking about the situation. Judging by the look of it, these monsters had never fought among themselves in the 700 years they had been locked in the castle. But there is no time, so he decides to use the teleporter to leave the plane immediately. At this moment, Chin appears and destroys the enemies near him with a few blows. The guy tells the captain to get ready by taking out the disc, but the system says that it is impossible. The only way out is to jump out of the window, and the chance of survival in the air is very small. Because the plane has been hovering for so long, the laws of space and time in the zone have likely changed. Brian looks for a way out, but the situation seems hopeless and almost without options. A fallen one attacks him from behind, but he manages to dodge and counterattack. At the same time, he wonders if he really feels the fear of death, but the clock still shows zeros. The young man suggests that it is more of a feeling of disappointment than fear or panic. There are 100 seconds left before the explosion, and there is not enough time to find the puzzle piece. Even if it is found, it is unknown whether it will have the effect needed to escape the zone. Tsen finishes off the last of the fallen, saving the guy from a crowd of opponents. He says to use teleportation, because there are monsters that will create a lot of problems. The teenager replies that the devices don't work, and that the only thing he can do is try to jump. The captain tries to break the porthole, but is part of a zone that cannot be changed. Brian offers to open the plane's hatch, hoping that it will be subject to their efforts. It turns out to be locked with a combination lock that can only be activated from the cockpit. Time runs out, and a massive explosion occurs, destroying everything and everyone on board. Brian's body sinks into the water, and the system sign announces the end of the game with a choice of action. For the first time, his watch changed its value from 0 to 1 on the digital display. He opens his eyes and finds himself in first grade, with exactly 6 minutes left before the explosion. Now, the guy understands that he is trapped in a time loop and will die until he finds a piece of the puzzle. It won't affect him, but Chin might not be able to withstand the repetitions that will continue indefinitely. After each death, they will be transported to random places on the plane, changing the cordon. The fallen one nearby becomes active, starting to attack him in the cramped confines of the salon. The system tells his past, noting that he became a monster after learning about the bomb. The creature delivers a powerful blow, throwing Brian back several meters into the depths of the cabin. The noise causes other fallen to react, beginning to approach the site of the loud collision. The teenager calls out to the captain for help as sharp claws pierce his chest. In such circumstances, he may not even live until the next scheduled explosion. Sen wakes up in economy class, where one of the most dangerous monsters is already approaching him. He quickly deals with him, trying to understand what is happening and why he is alive. A man hears a cry for help and goes in the direction from which it came, through the noise and din. At this time, Brian tries to use the talent on the fallen one, but fails to absorb it. He understands that Chin will not make it in time and internally reconciles himself with his inevitable death. At this moment, the captain bursts into the first class, scattering monsters in different directions. But it's too late. he sees the creature deal a fatal blow to the teenager. His negative emotions increase sharply, moving into the yellow zone of the clock indicators. The husband madly cuts through the fallen around him, not paying attention to other events around him. The creature that took Brian's life attempts to mutate, but to no avail. Sen cuts off his arm and then cuts through his entire body, completely destroying his opponent. The captain is covered in the blood of monsters, and chaos and traces of a fierce battle reign all around. There is an explosion, and at the last moment he realizes what is happening on this plane. The teenager opens his eyes again, this time in a toilet, where there is not a single fallen person. He is sickened by the blood from the fallen meat he consumed during the previous fight. He didn't gain any new talent, but he did strengthen his muscles a little after this dangerous experience. Now he doesn't have to rush into battle right away, and Brian can calmly analyze the situation. There is no bomb in the toilet, so there is nothing to do here, but there is some activity on board through Tsenya. The guy decides to at least talk to the captain this time, while they have some free time. He devises a plan for the man to act as a wall between him and the fallen, while he searches for clues. 2 minutes later, a voice comes over the intercom warning of in-flight turbulence. Brian decides it's time to go out and heads into the salon, leaving the restroom for cover. Sen still fights monsters, including the one that killed the teenager in the last cycle. Noticing the guy, he quickly ends the fight, cutting off the creature's head in one motion. The guy briefly explains the situation, noting that the captain's emotions have jumped to 35. This surprises him, but without commenting on it, he continues to present his guesses and conclusions. In his opinion, there are 2 cross-flows of time in the zone, and he and the captain are stuck in one of them. They move in a circle, forming a loop, but at the same time they move forward in the original time. In 6 minutes, they will return to the moment they appeared on the plane, and the tower will continue to move on. Brian asks Tsen to protect him while he searches for the bomb to break the time loop. The man agrees, and they go their separate ways to carry out their part of the general plan. The captain keeps silent about the fact that no matter how much he restrains his emotions, the indicator does not decrease, which is surprising. He rushes into battle, hoping that Brian will be able to figure things out and save them. The teenager arrives in the cockpit and sees that the plane is controlled, so it flies smoothly. The 2 before him had been in the red zone, swimming in the sea and becoming fallen creatures. They boarded the plane as humans, but it is now clear that the flight was filled with those susceptible to darkness. Most would go mad after 700 years of continuous death, but here the reason is different. All the passengers were people who would have succumbed to the darkness anyway, and it was as if they had been specially gathered together. Time is running out, and Brian doesn't have the opportunity to deal with each passenger on board individually. The 4th attempt begins, and this time they are lucky. The teenager and Senya are nearby. The captain's emotional level has risen again, and he is unlikely to withstand several more reincarnations. If the indicator exceeds the threshold, Brian will lose a strong ally and gain an enemy. Each cycle must bring them closer to the solution if they want to get out of this place. The young man asks if the captain noticed any oddities in the behavior of the fallen during battles and encounters. He answers in the negative, noting only that some did not try to attack him. Brian decides to find out more, and they go to economy class, where the mentioned creatures are. Chin just killed, advising him to pay attention to it. Creatures appear before them, and the child asks if he can, not to kill them right away. The creature with the features of a bird was extremely lucky and at the same time equally unlucky in life. After becoming a fallen, he gained a rare mutation called the Lucky Loser. The second creature that attacked Brian was a writer whose books were being copied by others. 14 of his works seemed alien and became successful, while he was left without fame. Eventually, one of the thieves sued him for plagiarism, which was the final blow to him. The captain rushes to intercept the monster, ordering the young man to move on without delay. Next, the teenager meets the fallen, who, in life, threw his friend off a cliff for a ticket to the tower. He later died of a heart attack due to the news of the bomb, before he could take advantage of the opportunity. Brian dodges the attack, finally confirming the guess that all the passengers were close to turning into monsters even before landing. Sen helps the boy again by killing the creature while he continues to analyze the situation. Everyone on board is the original inhabitants of the world 700 years ago, who lived before the events of the tower. Also, the system this time talks about their life experiences, not their fighting skills. Initially, this flight was supposed to take people to the tower, and the organizer gave them a chance to survive. The unknown person watched them as if they were guinea pigs in a large experiment. If the tower is now surrounded by a black zone, then the plane at this moment is the safest place. Whatever course of action they choose, jumping, stopping the explosion, or doing nothing, all paths lead to death. Brian wonders why the bomb was planted if the mastermind wanted the future fallen to end up in the tower. He suggests that the selection was not based on poverty, but on the level of negative emotions in people. It is also surprising that the passengers immediately became depressed from the mere fact of the bomb. There is probably something that amplifies the negativity and makes a person transform faster. Puzzle piece guard in the zones, so the solution lies in him. After figuring things out, Brian tells the captain to stop holding back and destroy the rest of the monsters. Sen quickly deals with all the enemies and leads the teenager further through the plane's cabin. At this point, the system announces that the guy's watch has turned into spirit. They instantly raise his emotion level to almost the maximum, and a huge eye appears on his hand. Brian tells the captain with resignation that he has serious problems. A teenager gains a new rare mutation, a ghostly gaze. He remains calm, although the clock's readings are now changing erratically. The higher the number on the screen, the more pronounced the physical deviation of his body is. Sen wonders what they will do about it when suddenly the mutation starts to spread further. The guy's hand changes even more, and he gains a demonic angle, a level 7 fallen weapon. The young man sees this as an advantage, because now he has something to fight against dangerous creatures with. The system reminds him that if he returns to the tower, he will immediately turn to ashes. Putting the issue aside, Brian convinces the captain, who remains conscious, that they need to move on. In economy class, a teenager looks around and notices 3 fallen people who are not trying to attack. The girl in the center fell in love with a scientist during her lifetime and became pregnant by him, not suspecting a trap. It turned out that he wanted to know what would happen to the child if he became a monster. Now there is a huge hole in her stomach, and she has gained the ability to amplify the emotions of others. Next to her is a man who had no tragic history, but who himself strove to become fallen. Having learned the purpose of the flight, he voluntarily agreed to control everything that was happening. However, the transformation turned out to be much more painful than he imagined, and he regretted it 100 times. The last creation is the stalker of this woman, who loved her in life and continues to protect her after death. The explosion is coming closer, and Brian doesn't have time to figure out why the 3 aren't attacking them. He tells the captain that he has leads, but he will have to die again to get the answers. The young man is worried that they might fall and be stuck in this plane forever. He asks if Chin has any regrets, but he brushes them off, telling him not to think about it. The captain is sure that he cannot die here, because there are those who are waiting for him and about whom he worries. In the final seconds, the woman suddenly responds, congratulating Brian as a new passenger. A new cycle begins, and now the teenager immediately finds himself next to a trio of strange fallen ones. He quickly gets his bearings and happily grabs the woman, asking if she knows Yan. Decline replies that he has no idea who he is talking about, and assures that his words are true. She says there is no girl by that name on board, although she reacts noticeably to the name being mentioned. This time, Brian is bound to get closer to the solution because the indicator on the price watch is growing. The teenager's hand returned to its normal appearance, although the spirit still remained on his wrist. The system advises to take off the watch before it starts changing again, but the guy is trying to do the opposite. He is confident that only by descending will he be able to learn the truth from the local creatures. Brian shares with the woman that he arrived from the tower the plane was heading to and sees her resentment. This resentment had been stored in her for hundreds of years, as if alive, and now it manifested itself at the mention of the tower. The guy passionately talks about the mission for which he and the captain arrived in this place. At the same time, he lies that Yan is his dear friend and the most important person in his life. The teenager already knows that the girl is not on board, but the woman can give an important clue. He creates an image of Yan from the hints he finds, pretending to be deeply in love with her. The one who caused everyone on the plane to become monsters and lose their human appearance fell in front of him. She is almost indistinguishable from a human being, and, having thrown on a coat, no one will recognize the monster in him. And yet it remains unclear how it is connected to the time loop that has engulfed this area. Although Yan left the zone number in her painting, she has never been there, but something unites them. Earlier, Brian noticed half a heart in the woman's stomach and thought the baby in the womb had died. Now he suggests that the child might have survived and remained human, and that the scientist took him to the tower. The child later grew up and continued his lineage, so Yan may be his descendant. The emotions of the fallen are greatly distorted, as was the case with Una, who lost almost all of her senses except one. Perhaps the girl suffered because her mother was decadent and did not experience joy. It remains to be seen how Yan learned the zone number and whether it is related to the second half of the heart. The woman again says she doesn't know who she's talking about and asks if Brian regrets his choice. She reminds him that now he won't be able to return to the tower even if he wants to do so. The guy replies that it was worth coming, having a chance to save Yan, which irritates the fallen one. At this moment, the value on the young man's watch increases sharply, and his body begins to distort. The system informs that the appearance of a series of numbers in his head will mean a connection to this zone. Then, he will no longer be able to leave her, even if he tries, because he will become a part of her. Brian realizes that if all the fallen know the area code, then Yan could have learned it from the woman because of the connection between them. The guy jumps up, continuing to play the role of being burning with love for Yan. In the end, the interlocutor says that the girl is still in the tower, and she even knows her exact location. The teenager persistently finds out the details, hearing that Yan is alive, but in the hands of a dangerous man. There are 3 minutes left before the explosion, and he begs to tell him how to get out to save his beloved. The fallen one mocks him, reminding him that he won't be able to escape anyway, and that love will be replaced by hate. And yet she shares that the bomb is in the cargo hold and is being guarded by the owner of the zone. This is a special fallen one that even all the passengers united together could not defeat. The woman notes that the captain, although strong, is not like her and Brian, and as a fallen man, he will lose his mind. She says that one day they managed to lure out the guard and defuse the bomb. But she exploded anyway, and apparently she has now become a spirit, which means there is no other way out. The fallen one must be defeated within 6 minutes, otherwise an explosion is inevitable and all will be lost. The disappointed guy asks how the woman is able to sense Yan from such a distance. She explains that there is a connection between them that works both ways, but not all the time. Chin appears. The value on the clock has become dangerously high. Brian quickly shares information about the bomb and the guard with him, after which the plane explodes again. The 6th attempt begins, and the teenager and the captain immediately act together, coordinating attacks. The man's watch has a yellow light on, but for now he is in control of himself and his emotions. They quickly reach the cargo bay, the doors of which are already open. The system advises not to let the guard out of sight, mentioning parcels with flight data. Once inside, Chin wastes no time and immediately rushes to attack the fallen enemy. With one blow, he cuts off his head, but he has a legendary mutation, Reincarnation. The creature quickly recovers, ready to enter the battle and defend its zone again. It is he who keeps the entire plane in a time loop from which it is impossible to escape in the usual way. You can only win by finding a weak spot, but the enemy knows how to move it around the body. Sen cuts the enemy into pieces with a series of blows, and the system begins to praise him. But the monster instantly recovers, even despite the critical and exhausted state after the battle. The captain decides to cut him up until he runs out of energy for regeneration. Senya's emotion indicator jumps to a critical level due to the touch of an enemy. It appears that the creature is capable of transmitting its negative influence through physical contact. However, the captain's attacks still reduce the guard's recovery speed, even though he is exhausted. Brian tries to figure out how they can win, while Chin is under the influence of darkness. The Fallen wraps him in bandages and throws him into the boxes, trying to break his opponent's resistance. The man orders the young man to find the enemy's weak spot in order to deliver the finishing blow. But this won't work if the opponent moves his Achilles heel across the body again. Then Brian remembers the watch and decides to become a Fallen One to increase his strength and speed. He ends up behind the bodyguard, who doesn't have time to react to the young man's powerful blow. The guy's body changes even more. A bone wing grows from his back, sharpening his image. He must defeat the monster in 2 minutes, defuse the bomb, and send Sen to the tower. The teenager ponders how to return himself if the time loop is broken. He realizes that the only way to gain reincarnation is to absorb the Guardian. Brian lunges forward, aiming his claws at the fallen man, who intercepts his hand. But the boy doesn't stop. He continues to strike again and again until he finally cuts off his opponent's head. Suddenly, the guard begins to address him, recovering and inquiring about his transformation. The creature wants to know how Brian managed to directly mutate the fallen 7th level. The teenager does not engage in conversation, instead attacking again and knocking the monster aside with a powerful blow. He regenerates again, transferring his weakness to another place to avoid being defeated again. The young man asks the system to track the pattern, and it promises to look into the matter. At some point, Brian loses his defense, and the guard prepares to deal him the final blow. Sen intervenes, cutting the bandages wrapped around the boy and restricting his movements. The captain sees that his subordinate is exhausted and orders him to step aside so as not to take any risks. But the teenager refuses, asking to deliver the decisive blow to the eye of the fallen at the right moment. He promises to set up the enemy so that Chin can hit exactly when the opportunity arises. Finally, the guy manages to catch the enemy off guard and pierce his chest with his attack. The enemy mocks, saying that he missed by a bit and didn't hit the real weak spot. But everything was calculated, and Brian gives the captain the signal to carry out the final attack. The man pierces the guy's wing while simultaneously cutting through the guard's body in one motion. The fallen dies, crumbling into sand and bandages, leaving behind only debris. The young man falls to his knees, his monstrous end having been severed from his body in battle. Before the creature finally disappears, Brian uses his talent and absorbs its essence. The system upsets him because the bandages holding him are not part of the enemy's body. Moreover, reincarnation is still in effect. Therefore, the time cycle continues its endless repetition. The teenager demands that Chin try to teleport to the tower, but the discs still don't work. Despite everything, the young man's clock has not reset, so it remains within the main time flow. Brian finds a new piece of the puzzle among the remains of the guard, a ring finger. There are 5 more pieces that will fit together to form the palm, creating the complete artifact in its entirety. The item found can cancel the effects of the zone, but does not affect the powers of fallen creatures around it. At least now, inside the plane, there are no boundaries that were previously impossible to break. The teenager asks the captain to try again, to punch a hole in the plane's body from the inside. Chen does as requested, and this time he succeeds, causing the plane to shake violently. Now the man needs to jump and activate the teleport, finding himself in a new area. He asks what Brian will do, and is told that he will have to die again. The guy also intends to find Yan and get rid of the mutations in order to subsequently return to the tower. Sen is worried that the teenager will not be able to make a hole in the wall on his own if necessary. The young man urges him on, reassuring him that he already has a plan, so there is no reason to worry. The husband promises to return if Brian stays too long and jumps out of the plane. The guy is captivated by the captain's vitality and loyalty because there are few such people in the world. The teenager rises from the cargo bay and sees the fallen trying to breach the hull. He finds the trio of monsters remaining calm, as if nothing had happened. Brian shows them that the plane's walls can now be destroyed, and says that he killed the guard. He asks the woman to tell him where Yan is, so he can save her from captivity. She is touched by his attitude and promises to tell him the girl's whereabouts. At this moment, a new explosion occurs, and time is rewinded. returning everything to the beginning. The seventh attempt begins. Brian wakes up in first grade and rushes to find the fallen trio. At the same time, the guard goes hunting, demanding that all the monsters on the plane deliver the guy. He warns that if they refuse, they will have to suffer forever, with no chance of peace. Now the teenager will not be able to pass through the salon without hindrance and is forced to look for another way forward. He removes his watch to avoid becoming a fallen one again and rushes forward, attacking enemies in his path. The young man understands that the woman retained hatred for the scientist who deceived her, but not for his descendants. After all, they share her blood, and there is an unbreakable bond between them that cannot be broken. When Brian is cornered, he uses his absorption talent and kills his opponent with one dash. After eating the flesh of a fallen one, the teenager's life bar lasts slightly longer than usual. But suddenly, he is attacked from behind by the creature that killed the guy in the second cycle of events. The fallen are becoming more numerous, and Brian is already preparing for the fact that he will have to start all over again. But a woman appears, ordering her stalker to save the guy from imminent death. The dog-like monster lunges forward, baring its sharp teeth, ready to tear its enemy to pieces. The creature quickly deals with the enemy, even when the latter pierces it through the chest. It has a skill that distributes the damage received between multiple targets at once. The fallen uses his spiritual power to stop the carnage. But at that moment, the guard grabs him from behind, trying to wrap him in bandages and tie him up. Before he can do so, the woman and Brian jump out of the plane into the open sky. The stalker prevents the mummy from following them, clinging to it with all his might and holding it in place. In anger, the guardian vows to subject the fallen to eternal torture without the slightest mercy. Meanwhile, as he falls, the teenager sees that the teleportation disc is finally starting to work. The woman gives him half of the heart, saying that it will lead the guy to Yan in any zone. When she became fallen, all her organs separated from her body and became only ornaments. After this, the heart turned into a spirit thanks to the baby that was fallen in the womb. She says that she was actually supposed to have 2 children. If 2 people from the same family had children, it was always a boy and a girl. Thanks to her heart, she was able to maintain a connection with them, imitating the bond between mother and child. This spirit is the only consolation for the fallen, but he still decides to give it to Brian. The guy assumes that the daughters of this family are still being experimented on in secret. He believes that Jan ran away to the mental hospital on purpose, escaping from dangerous experiments. The young man asks where the other half of the heart is, hoping to learn more. The woman explains that several years ago, Jan's older brother broke off contact with her completely. Before this, for 700 years, no one dared to do so, except for the last offspring. Perhaps something happened to him that even she herself could not feel as she fell into decline. Although Brian believes that she knows more than she is willing to admit and is hiding the truth. The woman says goodbye to the guy, asking him to take care of Yan and save her life at any cost. He finally teleports away, leaving the place where he met her in the distant past. The system sums up and tells the teenager that the girl heard all his declarations of love. In the tower, Lum and the others anxiously wait at the Steelies for Chin and Brian to return from the danger zone. Lin tries to calm everyone down, assuring them that the captain is strong enough to handle any threat. Before the man can object, the aforementioned man appears, exhausted and covered in wounds. He is greeted, but Chin ignores everyone, heading to the ceiling to teleport after Brian. Lum stops him, trying to convince him to go to the hospital for immediate treatment. Lin notices the teenager is missing, and Yin then assumes that he may have died. But before everyone can get discouraged, the teleporter activates again, and the guy appears. Yan's location, but passes out and is caught by the captain. The teenager's body still has serious wounds that are bleeding and require immediate assistance. Reacting quickly, Lum orders the bringing of medics and those with a talent for healing. While everyone is fussing, the guy gives the price of half a heart and explains its purpose. The man immediately sees Jan's location and promises to take charge of all further actions. Brian is being treated, his bones are completely shattered, so urgent surgery is required. Before the captain leaves, The teenager advises him to take a few reliable fighters with him. The man listens and calls Lum with him, going to look for Jan on the 3rd floor. Brian is brought to the hospital, with demands to immediately clear the way for the gurneys with the wounded. But suddenly, a holding corps blocks their way, informing them that there is no further passage. Dean says that they are responsible for the young man, and that it would be better for the intelligence service to step back and not interfere with the work. Lin starts arguing and Wang joins in, threatening to start a fight if they are not allowed through. Yin stops the conflict at the very beginning, realizing that now is not the time for this. She hands Brian over to the holding squad, threatening punishment if he is harmed. The wounded boy is taken away under the watchful eyes of the rest of their group. Sean asks the girl why she decided to give it to him, since they could beat important data out of him. Lin reassures him, believing that Brian has already managed to convey everything to the captain, finding the strength to talk. The containment corps probably knows this, so it's to their advantage to treat the teenager for questioning. Suddenly, Van starts praising the guy because he was all broken, but remained calm. Continuing his thoughts, Lin says that now the holding corps will act on 2 fronts at once. They will send some people to monitor Price, and others will be involved in the treatment and interrogation of Brian. Yin is surprised that Lin has become so smart, because usually she was the one responsible for the brains in the squad. Meanwhile, Chin and Lum arrive on the 3rd floor, where they are immediately met by Ming and his men. He praises the captain for surviving the Purple Zone, calling it his greatest achievement. The man is also confident that the captain managed to find out Jan's whereabouts upon his return. To this, Chin replies that the restraining corps will not stop him, and he will fulfill his mission. Min agrees that he cannot cope with the 2 strongest fighters of the Division Corps. He adds that the captain risked his life to obtain important information. However, Min has a request. He wants his best people to be involved in the search for the girl. It seems she's been captured by a powerful master, so some extra help in the rescue wouldn't hurt. Sen warns that he will not be able to protect them in case of danger while carrying out the task. But Min assures that this will not be necessary, because these are elite officers of his troops. In addition, a sword and shield are sent to the Corps Division for the arrest, so the kidnapper has no chance. At the Aristocrats' Academy in the gym's locker room, Jan paints pictures under the supervision of his captor. The girl believes that she has 2 options: stay with the attacker and leave the tower someday, or return to the mental hospital. 2 hours ago, she would have chosen the first option without hesitation, but now she doesn't want to leave this place. The masked man asks why she wants to stay in a cage meant for exiles. The girl says that there are people in the world who love her and are ready to risk everything to find and save her. Jan confidently states that she does not want to become decadent under any circumstances anymore. In the past, she communicated with a voice that promised freedom in a place where intelligent fallen creatures live. People with emotional defects, like her, develop faster, skipping several stages of evolution. She will receive freedom, eternal life, and the whole world, while others will rot, bringing themselves to extinction. Jan asks why her interlocutor has so much hatred for humanity and a desire to destroy it. He reminds us how cruel and arrogant it is, because the girl herself suffered at the hands of people. She agrees to this and asks to take her and make her fallen without hesitation. Now she is renouncing her words, wanting to wait for her saviors at any cost. The man wonders if those depicted in the picture she painted will come for her. Yan fakes a smile and confirms, adding that they headed in her direction. The kidnapper thinks that the girl in front of him is the perfect candidate to be turned into a blight. He tries to convince her that she is too different and will be locked up in a mental hospital anyway. Jan thinks about what Brian said and says again that he doesn't want to leave the tower. The man can only accept her choice and leave the girl alone without further persuasion. However, he cannot miss the chance and decides to arrange a rehearsal for the upcoming great battle. Upon entering the academy grounds, Chin suddenly felt a terrifying aura that only high fallen ones could feel. Lum reminds him that monsters are not allowed in the tower, but the captain trusts his instincts. He asks the holding corps fighters if they are sure they want to go inside. They confirm their desire, assuring that they will provide any possible support in battle. The group enters, and Chin uses his ability to determine the correct direction of movement. On the way, Lum asks if the kidnapper is a member of the Tower God cult, and the captain denies it. However, if Brian's assumptions are to be trusted, there may be a certain connection between them. Lum's shield hasn't been repaired yet, so he's currently without his usual equipment. Suddenly, the escort officer feels that it has become too dark and hears someone whispering. He begins to go crazy. The noise in his mind grows and presses on him more and more. Chen locates the source of the ominous aura in the barn, preparing to draw his sword to attack. At this point, the holding force behind him is completely disabled. The guy screams, trying to justify himself for the murder, although no one even talks to him. Lum watches in confusion, not understanding what caused the officer's strange behavior. Then he points at the man, accusing him of something, and comes closer with his sword raised. He suddenly attacks, but the blade does no damage, instead breaking on Lum's neck. The price is to simply neutralize the guy before he creates even more serious problems. The man happily carries out the order, throwing it aside to the other officers holding him back. This only makes them angrier. The dark aura fuels their delirium and clouds their minds even more. Suddenly the hijacker appears, saying that with two it would be more difficult for him to win. Sen orders Lum to take care of the madmen, while he prepares to deal with the main threat. The fight begins, and the enemy instantly catches the blade of the captain's sword, reproaching him for his impatience. The enemy calls himself Cain, expressing joy at their long-awaited meeting. Sen recognizes the name because Brian once asked about it, remembering old events. His enemy does not give up strength, blocking every attack and maintaining a high tempo of the fight. They exchange blows, gradually increasing the speed and pressure on each other. Cain is fascinated by his opponent's skill and declares that he wants to take over his body. Sen does not let him finish and attacks again, this time striking from above. But the enemy is equipped with spirit equipment, and it is also difficult for the captain to break through the defense. He is confident that by continuing to beat him in one place, he will be able to break him sooner or later. Cain says that in the history of the tower, there were only 3 with such power, and they all fell. The captain ignores the words, aiming his attacks at the enemy's mask, who asks if it looks familiar. Sen realizes that he has been confused with Brian, and, in order to protect his subordinate, confirms the mistake. Meanwhile, Lum managed to rein in the officers of the restraining corps, leaving only those who had not gone mad conscious. But suddenly he too began to hear voices that drove him crazy. But he was able to resist their influence. In addition, he managed to bring the others to their senses, restoring order among the entire group. Cain notices this, lamenting that the tower greatly limits his abilities and influence over others. Brian wakes up in the hospital, hooked up to a breathing mask, and wrapped in numerous bandages. Dean greets him, explaining that their corps is treating the boy, so there is no need to worry about expenses. The young man is sure that there is no benefit here because now he is useless for the restraining corps. Still, the man asks for Jan's location, and Brian gives the exact coordinates without hesitation. Dean immediately runs away, calling Captain Min on the phone to report the information he received from the guy. The system asks why he told everything, and he replies that the data has already lost all value. Brian decides to analyze the events on the plane while he remains immobilized from his injuries. He realizes that the level of the accompanying force never increased due to the time loop. He also recalls that after the Guardian was killed, many of the Fallen jumped out of the cabin. But after the time reset, everything returned to its place, except for him and those who teleported from the tower. It turns out that the tower itself erases both the Fallen and the influence of their abilities on space and events. The system reports that he has only explored 22% of the tower, missing all the storylines. He has to find out more about this area because even the first guess about the culprit may be wrong. There are many boxes stored in the cargo hold that may contain answers to most questions. The young man suggests that the entire plane is one big experiment, specially created by someone unknown. The mummy's appearance there seems strange, as does why his bandages turned into spirits after the events. It is quite possible that the whole thing was staged, but the purpose and reason for the plane's flight towards the tower are unknown. However, Brian learned an important lesson. He is still too weak to survive in the purple zones. If it weren't for the timely appearance of the spirit and Tisen's help, he would have been stuck in the loop forever, with no chance of escaping. The young man remembers the watch and wonders if he will burn if he wears it inside the tower. At that moment, Dean runs into the room, saying that he urgently needs to go to the third floor. He scolds him, noticing that he took off his mask without permission, and is outraged by such recklessness. Brian changes the subject, asking what happened since everyone is in such a hurry now. The man explains that Yan has been discovered, but the elite containment corps has been almost completely wiped out. The teenager asks about Price and learns that the captain is fine, although the kidnapper has escaped. Brian immediately understands that we are talking about Kane, because only he is capable of such a thing. Earlier, Lum was again forced to confront the crazy officers of the restraining corps. He eventually defeats them, leaving everyone unconscious after a tough fight. Sen continues to fight Kane, enduring taunts and provocations from his enemy. Eventually, the enemy decides to push the captain and suddenly increases in size, breaking the roof. Chin orders Lumu to take care of the girl Yan, who is currently in the wardrobe. Meanwhile, he himself will try to kill the enemy using his second talent. Kane debates whether he should destroy the hospital or the main containment building first. He lifts his leg, intending to crush the captain like an ant under his burden. But at that moment, Chin goes on the attack, flying quickly straight towards his opponent's face. In an instant, Kane's mask cracks from a powerful blow, causing damage to the giant's entire body. The explosion blows away the debris, and Lum, shocked by what he saw, runs even faster towards the wardrobe. There he finds a girl, immediately grabs her, and carries her out so that they are not buried under the ruins. The academy building collapses, collapsing like a house of cards under a strong gust. Lum scolds Tsen, demanding that he explain himself more clearly next time. The captain orders not to approach, because the enemy has not yet left, and the threat remains. Kane rebuilds his body from the shadows, promising to show Tsenyu all the filth and darkness of the tower so that he becomes fallen. He claims that the captain has the same madness hidden within him, judging by his past actions. In fact, Chin doesn't understand what is being discussed, since it was Brian who encountered Kane's puzzles. Not wanting to wait any longer, the captain pierces the enemy with his sword, hoping to deliver a fatal blow. But this doesn't work, because the enemy is wearing someone else's shell, which he can easily change. Before leaving, Kane asks what ability Chin used during the fight. He makes several guesses, and one of them turns out to be correct, hitting the target. Disappearing completely, he warns to be careful with the 6th floor, because Chin should die only at his hands. While hiding the sword, the captain already plans to interrogate Brian to find out who Kane is. His attention is drawn to Lum and Yan, who come closer and stop nearby. The girl asks where her boyfriend is, which leaves the men slightly surprised. The captain realizes that Brian's words probably affected her and her perception. He tells her that he is not her boyfriend and that she will have to go back to the mental hospital. Yan stops Sen as he is about to leave and asks who he is and why Brian entrusted him with half of his heart. The man explains that the teenager almost died on the plane, returned to the tower seriously wounded, and could not come himself. Lum changes the subject, suggesting that due to the extensive destruction, a containment corps is already on its way. He suggests contacting the top of the head directly, and Chin agrees to the idea without hesitation. A little later, the place is surrounded, and Captain Min notes that it will be difficult to calm public opinion. He also thanks Ching for saving his elite fighters from death with his partner. Lum appears and says that Yan needs to be taken to the hospital where the containment corps will take care of her. The man happily adds that the reconnaissance squad won, which causes displeasure in Ming. Sen decides to immediately sort out the girl's affairs and heads to her. She wonders if they will visit her together with Brian, because she really wants to see him. The captain repeats once again that Yan misunderstood the guy's words and interpreted them differently. The girl suddenly gets up and runs onto the academy grounds, asking to wait for her. Among the rubble, she finds her paintings and, putting on an artificial smile, gives them away in gratitude. The top panel shows Chin and Brian standing back to back as they collide in an airplane. Below is a drawing of the guy in his fallen form, with his distinctive features and details. Yan left clues in the painting. She didn't think anyone would be able to decipher them. Her family disliked her, did not want her to communicate with her foremother, and frowned upon sympathy for her. The captain realizes that the girl left the code only to calm herself down if no one saves her. She would say that the clues were too complicated, and that's why no one could solve them. And it was precisely at the moment of despair that someone appeared who actually came to her aid and saved her. It's no wonder that Yan felt sympathy for Brian after what she had experienced with him. Chen softens towards her, this time leading her by the hand and promising that they will meet again. At the hospital, Chen spoon feeds the teenager, caring for him, but he shows no joy. Lin mocks the girl, causing her irritation and anger, and an argument begins between them. There is an unfamiliar woman standing in the corridor outside the ward, and the system reports that she likes Chin. Wee asks if she wants to go inside, since all the captain's friends are gathered there. She refuses and chooses to wait outside, remaining aloof from the conversation inside. Brian is interested in the woman because she is the boss of a service agency and influential in her field. His thoughts are interrupted by Lin, who has managed to tie up and hang Chen from the ceiling. He asks what happened in the purple zone and why Chin left it first among everyone. The other members of the group are also interested in this story and are waiting for the guy's answer. The teenager begins to invent a dramatic story, mixing fiction with particles of truth. Only Yin understands that he is hiding something and is surprised how easily others believed his words. She doesn't comment on this, but orders the guy to lie down so she can examine him. 10 minutes later, the captain enters the room and everyone immediately bombards him with questions. The man ignores them, demanding that everyone leave because he needs to talk to Brian alone. When everyone is about to leave, Chin reminds them that they also need to take Chung with them. Left alone, the child first inquires about the losses in the containment unit and the results of the mission. In response, he learns that there are no casualties. The mission has been completed, and the girl has been found. Finally, they get to the main point, and the captain asks how Brian knows about Kane. The guy decides to be frank, so he talks about the disk of movement from the hospital and further. The system complains that the young man never mentioned her in the story, but he reminds her of her habits. He notes that she digs into other people's secrets, which others may not like. After listening to the teenager, Chin shares that Kane confused them, but the boy had already guessed it. He also suggests that the teacher is unaware of the captain's abilities and has greatly underestimated him. Therefore, he was not surprised when Brian did not kill Dandler, considering this a confirmation of weakness. It is logical that Kane could not even imagine that someone else would put on the mask and accept his challenge. Chia noticed anything strange during the direct confrontation with the enemy. The captain says that Kane is likely able to use the power of fallen beings. Throughout the fight, the gym was shrouded in black fog, and everyone except Lum and Ching went crazy. In addition, every time he struck, the captain felt the strength being sucked out of his sword. Brian is shocked, as the tower is supposed to block any effects of the fallen within its boundaries. He speculates that the lists of monster mutations and human talents may be similar, but there is no evidence. Sen puts forward the theory that it all depends on who is using the ability at a particular moment. If a person uses a mutation, the tower may ignore it, considering it acceptable. It only remains to be seen how Kane managed to obtain such powers. Brian asks if he said anything during the fight, and hears that he said too much, in the captain's opinion. This doesn't match the image the guy had of this opponent in his head. He asks Sen to play the role of Kane and show what he looked like when he spoke the words. In response, he receives a categorical refusal, but still convinces by arguing about the benefits for the analysis. The husband imitates Kane, repeating his every phrase, and this image amuses Brian. His laughter makes Sen stop, but the teenager insists that he needs a little more information. Behind the door of the room, members of the reconnaissance group are trying to eavesdrop on their conversation. Suddenly the door opens and Chin looks at her sternly, forcing everyone to step back. Then he checks the windows, makes sure no one is looking, and only then continues. A few humiliating minutes later, the man threatens Brian that it would be better if no one knew about this. He promises to take this secret to the grave, and then shares his thoughts about what he saw. The image that Chin showed was not like what he had personally encountered in previous encounters. Now Kane believes he knows who he's playing with the strength and presence of a captain and the intelligence of Brian. Before he tries to attack, he will probably prepare for the fight properly and think through his plan. He pretends to be a person with a split personality, and the teenager admits that they are similar in some ways. It also contains notes of deep madness that make one ignore generally accepted norms and laws. But Brian is sure that he will not become like Kane, because he has long had his own moral principles, some of which are normal. Usually people lie for a purpose, and the teacher probably aims to gain absolute power. It follows that his pretense makes him stronger, but there is some hidden limitation. While the boy cannot put together the full picture, he is alarmed by the word voluntarily from Kane. He is probably only able to gain the power of the fallen when the person chooses the transformation themselves. Talent number 23. Rogue, in the list of abilities, meets these conditions. Judging by the teacher's behavior, he is amazed by Ching's skills and the level of his strength. But logically, after 700 years, he should already have become an incredibly powerful fighter. However, his hatred for the 6th floor indicates that he is unable to defeat those residents. Apparently, some predator appeared above, and Kane became one of its victims and lost his advantage, who weakened him, and now he is fixated on Price, who can become a new source of power. Brian is certain that the Master has prepared a network of zones to undermine faith and loyalty to the tower. But in these tests he will not pretend to be crazy, because no one takes such a thing seriously. In battle, he behaved in a similar manner in order to prepare the ground for the scene where another dummy would kill him. We can expect the appearance of the Bearer of Justice, who will turn out to be Kane himself, undercover. He will gain the captain's trust, gradually pushing him towards becoming a fallen. Brian reassures Tsing that as long as he is around, there is no reason to worry or be afraid. That is why they should go through all the zones that the teacher has prepared together, and not separately. 3 days later, the teenager comes to the captain's office, where he is presented with a medal for his services. Qin also returns half of his heart to him, saying that Yan has really become attached to the guy. He convinces the young man that he should visit the girl, but Brian responds to this without much desire. The guy finds the concept of love too troublesome and full of unnecessary problems and worries. The captain insists, because it is better to lure Yan to his side before Kane does it. He also notes that the girl is very beautiful and attracts attention. The teenager tries to explain that he doesn't like women that much, and that he was playing a role for the assignment. Qin then simply orders him to go and meet Yan without further argument. Her security is now the responsibility of the 7th Division of the Intelligence Corps, which includes Brian. There is a fear that the teacher has already managed to sow the seed of doubt and mistrust in her heart. That's why the guy should talk to her, and maybe learn more about Kane. A teenager returns to the hospital, watching as patients gradually go crazy. He is met by a doctor who behaved less adequately and restrainedly last time. Captain Min ordered to be as kind to Brian as possible and not to put obstacles in his way. Arriving on the 6th floor, the escort hopes that this time there will be no destruction. The youth sees the scene of the battle between Qin and the cult member, noting that they did not hold back. Finally, he comes to the right room, where the doctor leaves him alone in front of the door. Brian goes inside where Yan is trying to learn to smile in front of a mirror, gets scared, and falls. The system reports that the girl has no divine or demonic powers, but she draws beautifully. The guy approaches her, noting that he wants to ask her about some important things. Yan says that the answers are already recorded in the drawings and brings him a whole stack of papers. They record and depict in detail every interaction she has had with Kane since they first met. The young man hides everything in his spirit bag, glad that he doesn't have to carry it in his hands. When he is about to leave, having received everything he needs, Yan stops him at the door. She asks if it is true what he said on the plane about his feelings of love for her. The guy immediately admits honestly that he lied, wanting to quickly resolve the misunderstanding. The girl is trying to figure out if she gave a bad gift and whether it should be improved. The teenager replies that the paintings are beautiful, but then clarifies that this cannot affect love. In the past, when Jan was little, she was never allowed to go anywhere and was forced to stay at home all the time. She was bored, and one day she noticed the maids counting money in their hands. She offered them a whole pack in exchange for playing with her. Of course, they quickly agreed, skillfully hiding their inner rejection. Later, discussing this with the woman from the plane, Jan shared that now people always want to play with her. The fallen one explained that this was not true affection, and that love did not depend on payment or gifts. The next time the maid was asked for more money, the girl replied that she had no more. The attitude immediately changed, and they rejected her, telling her to come only with money. When Jan's father learned of this situation, he became angry at his daughter's stupidity and safety. He ordered his eldest son to make sure that they never saw the girl again. She was sent to a mental hospital as if she were being thrown out as trash, without any regret or hesitation. Upon arriving at her new home, she immediately tried to appease the nurse by giving her a gift. She met her neighbors, but she could hardly talk normally to anyone, except for one, Cain, who addressed her as a princess and promised to take her away from here. He immediately realized that she was afraid to talk to people without giving them something. Then the man asked her what she would do if she met someone who was not affected by the gift. And here in front of her is Brian, who is not at all interested in gifts or bribery from the girl. The teenager notes that Chin would be more suitable for this than himself. The guy tells Yan that she hardly understands what true love is now. In response, he hears her desire to be near him if he likes it. The young man understands that this disposition is based only on the fact that no one has ever given her attention. This kind of display of feelings can be equated to a disease, and the only cure is to find more people who really like the girl. The closest thing to her now is the woman from the plane, who remains an important emotional reference point for Yan. Brian explains that before talking about love, Yan must experience family and friendship. This is probably exactly what she is striving for, mistakenly confusing different concepts of feelings. But the girl is locked in a hospital, where it is difficult to find a truly strong and sincere connection. Then the teenager promises that the next day, a girl will come to her who does not require gifts for attention. He plans to set her up with Chung, who is the complete opposite of Yan, and lives in an abundance of love. In addition, friendship is of great importance to Chung, and she is good at dealing with emotional issues. Brian talks about how wonderful it will be for Yan to find many real and interesting friends. At least in terms of emotions, they will be much more interesting than he is. Yan feels a pleasant premonition, inspired by his words and the anticipation of a new acquaintance. The guy goes, finally promising that they will meet again, because now he is her friend too. Returning to the Foreign Intelligence Building, the teenager reports to the captain about his meeting with Yan. The price becomes interesting. What kind of girl would a guy want if he decided to start a relationship? He explains that love will only limit his capabilities and slow down his development. He is much more interested in studying the secrets of the tower, fighting the fallen, and creating spirits. The captain decides not to continue this topic and moves on to discussing work issues. He provides Brian with information about the tasks of freeing the miners trapped under the rubble. It's a white zone, and the guy wonders why Chin, with his powers, took on such a simple task. He replies that although the matter is small, it is important, and he will take it on without hesitation. He does this when there is nothing more pressing that requires immediate attention. The young man is given 2 hours to meet, and they will leave as a full group. Although the task seems simple, Brian is left with a strange feeling of unease.